government by the people, of the people, for the people. But the people are retarded.
Good morning. It's not quite noon yet. Oh, perfect timing. Perfect timing. I'm like, I'm gonna go watch the press secretary. Look, she coming out. She just came out.
While there, they will pay respects to the victims of the horrific shooting attack last week and grieve with the families and community members who
Now,
have been affected by this.
this is the argument with this. Yeah, I get it. We're gonna grieve with that
brave first responders, dedicated
particular
nurses,
person. Why is she so quiet?
front lines of the response.
Turned her
I
out.
don't know. Turn your volume on.
She's all the way up.
This type of trip by the president has become too familiar.
But
Far too familiar.
why aren't we talking about the other
Too many
dozen plus
times the president and the first lady
mass shootings
have
that
traveled to
happened since?
communities completely torn apart by gun violence. As the president said last week, this is not normal,
There's a reason.
and we can't accept it as normal.
It kind of is,
So
though.
while Friday will be a solemn day and a time for the president to be with Americans who are in mourning, he will also continue to demand that Congress act. They must pass an assault weapons ban. They must enact universal background checks. They must help states across the country adopt and strengthen red flag laws. In the meantime, this president will continue to do everything in his power, to end this gun
The Second
violence
Amendment.
epidemic. And I would note that Greg Jackson, the deputy director of the White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention, has been on the ground in Maine all of this.
There's already laws against violence, though.
A whole of government response to support the people.
Crazy how criminals don't care about laws, isn't it?
Talking about almost every day in
Right.
The briefing room is part of our 10 days of 10 drugs series. We're highlighting Farxiga, a drug used to treat diabetes, heart failure, and chronic kidney disease that was selected for Medicare price negotiation as part of President Biden's Inflation Reduction Act. Last year, hundreds of thousands of Medicare beneficiaries spent an average of up to $448 out of pocket for this life-saving drug, while Big Pharma made record profits and spent nearly $400 million on lobbying to keep prices high for American families.
Isn't Big Pharma one of your
taking on Big Pharma and allowing Medicare to negotiate
greatest partners, though?
drug prices for seniors. President Biden and of course
Shh,
congressional
they
Democrats
ain't gonna
finally
tell
had
you
done
that.
by passing the Inflation Reduction Act without a single Republican vote. As a result, insulin is now capped at $35 a month for seniors, and for the first time,
That's what it was under Trump's administration. I just don't get it.
whatever they want for life-saving
Oh, we
drugs,
need to change it.
Medicare
Make it
will be able
be that
The
it's
same thing.
prices for drugs like Farxiga.
Because if we take theirs away and put ours in place, now it has our name on it.
Over the past few
Yeah,
months,
makes
we have
sense.
heard scores of current and former national security officials, veterans, and hundreds of military spouses and families
If you're ever feeling useless,
Tommy Tuberville's dangerous blockade
just know
on many
it took
and nearly
this
380
institution 20 years, trillions of dollars,
Yesterday, Republicans
thousands of lives
that call,
to replace Taliban with
from some of them, Senator
Taliban.
Leader Mitch McConnell said those holds are a bad idea. Republican Senator Joni Ernst said that Tuberville was using nominees as political pawns, and I do not respect men who do not honor their word. Republican Senator Dan Sullivan said that Tuberville's blockade is 100% wrong.
So you don't respect anybody in the halls of Congress?
Suicide mission and a downgrade of our readiness. Republican Senator Lindsey Graham said Senator Tuberville this doing great damage to our military. Let me say that again. Senator Tuberville is doing great damage to our military. Republican Senator Todd Young said Tuberville's holds just doesn't make sense to me. And Republican Senator Mitt Romney said, we recognize that there is a personal suffering as well as issues of military readiness. So
Okay, there's one concurrent viewer finally.
to act.
Somebody's watching?
Hello.
We face of service members releasing
I know
military
that my
service
algorithm's all
as
messed
the
up,
blockade continues. So we agree.
and
We've been very
I
clear
have to
about this for
actually
the past several
diligently put
months.
myself out there on
These
multiple
vacancies are
servers.
causing serious damage to our military readiness and our national
Boomer,
security.
what's up?
And they are causing stress and disruption to our military families across the chain of command and for military spouses and also their families. The world is too dangerous. It is too dangerous to play political games with our military. So we are pleased to see that the Senate is taking action. Senator Tuberville needs to end this damaging hold on all of our military nominees as soon as possible. Now, with that, I will turn it over to Admiral John Kirby from NSC, who knows this very, very personally, understands as well.
All right, let's see what this butt munch has to say. Oh,
Morning, everybody. Let me get my cheaters out here. I think you all heard the president address this earlier today, but thanks to his leadership and the intensive diplomacy that we've been involved in, more Americans have been able to get out of Gaza today. As the president said, so far, 74 U.S. citizens and family members arrived on the Egyptian side. That's in addition to the
Okay.
5 Americans who departed Gaza yesterday. And I want to stress that these numbers are
And
changing. in
and
real
family
time.
members.
Embassy Cairo has deployed a
So
consulate
Americans and not Americans, is what you're
to
saying?
support all these folks, make sure they get back to the embassy, and then we work with them on
right. Americans and their friends. Mm-hmm.
We obviously continue
And
to be focused
family.
on getting as many Americans out as quickly as possible, and we still fully expect that more Americans will be able to depart. Hopefully more today, but certainly we're looking for them to depart at a similar pace, if not better than what.
Concerned on why the
Again, I wanna
Americans
stress
must
again, it's a
evacuate.
fluid situation.
Uh,
Obviously, intensive diplomacy has been underway
are
on
you?
both sides of the border. Foreign
I
nationals
mean,
and
I imagine you're
as well.
concerned, but
In times of crisis, of course, like this,
But
we rely on our
you,
friends.
you,
Today's positive
because we're
news
on YouTube.
would not have been
Because we're on
possible
YouTube.
without the
You know,
assistance of Qatar,
when you think
frankly,
about
the
it.
leadership of President Sisi of Egypt.
What's
who, of
up,
course,
Elizabeth
uh,
OG? I'm alive and
responsible to
awake.
Sunday
Good to
with
see you.
the
Glad you're
leadership
here.
of those efforts. On the humanitarian side, yesterday, an additional 55 trucks with life-saving humanitarian assistance,
I
including
just
food, water, and medicine, were able to make their way into
I
Gaza
find that we're
via the
doing
Rafah
too
crossing.
much
We're hoping that the number of
for
trucks
not
crossing
currently
into
being
Gaza will continue to
at
increase
war
as
with
well. We know
with them.
55
But you
more
know, for
trucks
whatever
brings
reason,
us to more than
we're
240
moving a lot of
is
assets
not enough,
into
and we're going to continue to work
a
hard.
region
Increasing that aid has been a top
that we're
priority.
not currently involved in a war
Focused
with.
Speaking of diplomacy, today
A
the
lot
president
of
and
assets.
two bilateral meetings. Actually, I think
and then
he's already done the one. Met with
today
Luis Abinader
today
of the
already,
Dominican Republic to discuss a host of shared priorities, including
there's a
deepening bilateral
standalone
economic
Israel
ties,
bill that they've
enhancing
actually
schools and labor rights, as well as addressing the
passed
security situation in Haiti.
through
And later
procedural
today,
hurdle.
President
So I
Guaido
actually
flew
had
to
this
Chile to discuss
$14.5 billion in aid for
further
Israel.
cooperation in combating climate change,
Yay!
irregular migration, and of course, all of those discussions.
So-
those two bilateral meetings come just
Yay! We're more money out of my back pocket.
economic prosperity leader summit that's here at the White House, and we're glad to have the participation of all
We're excited to pay it.
The
Mm-hmm.
majority of them will be at the leadership.
Anybody here not
This leader summit advances President
funding a
Biden's
foreign
strong
nation?
regional partnership in the
I'm
Western
jealous.
Hemisphere, as he announced during last year's summit of the
I am
Americas.
now
Taken as a
declaring
whole, this leader
myself
summit represents a strong demonstration of the
king
United
of
States'
the
commitment to
pond.
work with our partners to take
Oh,
advantage of this once-in-a-generation
never mind.
opportunity. To recenter
I am the
global
king of the
supply
pond.
chains and
You come into the
narratives, we need to
Discord,
address our shared
you know,
migration challenges
it's
and
fun.
build
It's fun. We
meaningful
have fun.
economic opportunities
And,
in
you
the
know,
hemisphere.
maybe I should declare that I'm a country of my own. Demand money.
Do you remember how that worked out for Chaz Chop?
We talked about this before.
You remember the Capitol Hill occupied protest? It was an autonomous zone, but then they had to really quickly change their name because that means you're an invading country on foreign soil, and then they can bomb your apartment building.
The president already worked on one such pause when we were able to get those 2 Americans out. And that's what we're kind of looking at. And just to remind, when we're talking about
And all these supplies are immediately taken by terrorists.
what we're talking about are
Thank goodness I live in a
Oh,
fake country. No one can go to war with us. Yes, Elizabeth. Yes,
is
nobody
Elizabeth
can go to war
in
with
South
Australia.
Akron, Ohio?
get people out.
Yep.
That's
If you take any-
that must be
take-
nice.
I mean, where is the Israeli prime minister on this? Is he willing to continue to do this, especially if it's more than one?
Well, we were able to work with them to help get America.
They're taking your money. They're not taking Nancy's insider trading riches. Nah.
Each
Yeah.
instance of it,
I
No.
mean,
to get a pause is going to be unique.
she needs that money.
It's going to require negotiation.
She's important.
President, you heard him talk about this yesterday. 100%
Just ask her.
to doing what it takes to pursue that kind of diplomacy.
The UN Human Rights Office is raising some serious concerns about the Israeli airstrike at the refugee camp, saying they have serious concerns that these are disproportionate attacks that could amount to war crimes. Does the administration share the UN's concerns?
Oh, please.
Don't want to see a single civilian hurt or killed in this conflict, and there's been too many deaths as it is. Each one is tragic in its own right, as I've said, Mary, and we're doing everything we can to work with our Israeli counterparts to try to minimize the risk of civilian deaths and collateral damage.
But they airstrike a refugee camp.
I'm not in a position to say it is or it isn't. As I said, these are questions for the Israeli Defense Forces. These are their operations, and they, and only they, can speak to their targeting decisions and the way they're conducting their
They
operations.
said it was,
What
by the
we are
way,
gonna do
just in case
is
you were
make sure that they've
wondering.
got the tools and capabilities, including our perspectives and lessons that we've learned in this kind of warfare, as they enter into these operational decisions, because they have a legitimate threat by Hamas, an organization that wants to wipe them off the map. At the same time, because you can do both, we're going to make sure that we're doing everything we can to help them minimize civilian casualties and get humanitarian assistance.
One quickly on Tuberville. He's made pretty clear this morning again that he is not going to be changing his position. Would the president support changing the Senate rules to get around Tuberville's blockade?
That's for the Senate to decide. The president wants, as Karine said, wants the hold lifted. I mean, you're talking about 375 officers at this point, 379 positions, because some of them are dual hat nomination. That's a whole lot of senior leadership that can't move right now. And let me just give you an example here. Now that you made me,
They can't move. They
let's take a
frozen.
look at the Central Command.
Who is this guy? This is John Kirby.
Yeah,
But here's
he's an
some of the-
admiral.
Here's some of the positions that are being affected by Mr. Tuberville. The 5th Fleet Commander. That's the fleet that's in the Gulf region. The Deputy 5th Fleet Commander. The Deputy Central Command Commander. The Defense Attaché to Israel. The commander of the 380th Air Expeditionary Wing. The Chief of Staff at U.S. Central Command. Oh, and here's a good one. The Deputy Director of Strategy, Plans, and Policy for U.S. Central Command. The person that actually helps write our
What's up, Toy
operational
Box?
plans and executes policy decisions at that level. And
Definitely not as much as I used to. Botox is far more effective as of late. Still not saying it doesn't cut.
And if you don't think it isn't, I would urge.
Sounds like Martin Sheen.
Go on down to Tampa, Florida, and talk to the folks in Central Command about the priorities and what they're trying to do on behalf of our administration.
I mean, he's kind of an actor.
Can the press go do that? I don't think the press can go do that.
It's also having a deleterious impact on family members and folks who can't get schools for their kids, can't buy or rent houses, don't know where they're going to be living next. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Thanks, Kirby. The vice president was over in London and said that if Israel and Ukraine aid were bifurcated, that the president would veto it. You over the last couple of days have explained that you would veto something with offsets, especially involving the IRS. But I wanted to be clear: if the president was presented with a clean Israel funding bill without Ukraine, he would veto that as well.
The president believes that the supplemental request that we submitted contains 4 really critical national security urgent needs: Israel, Ukraine, our Indo-Pacific resourcing,
I
particularly when it
don't
comes
see
to
how either of those things
manufacturing
are
submarines,
critical to
of course,
our
missile
national
systems, all
security.
four are important. And the whole idea of an urgent supplemental is you're submitting what you think are urgent requests, and the president wants to
So,
see all of them,
the number
all of
3
them,
was the Indo-Pacific
all
region.
of them together. We wouldn't have submitted it that way if
So
we didn't believe that they
they
all weren't
they
finished.
they understand and realize
Obviously, you guys want to see them all four
that
together,
once
but
this actually starts going,
we're trying to figure out right
Yeah.
now how to
that it's going to snowball,
negotiate through this.
and they're going to have a massive presence
Administration. So was
over in
correct?
the South China Sea
Bill, if it didn't have other
and on that
president's
whole region.
The president would
Like
veto
they've already
anything
been
Israel
trying to
would
ramp
do. I
up.
think we've made
This
that
is escalating very quick.
Thanks, Admiral. The president keeps
Janet
saying
Yellen definitely
Israel
said we
needs
can
to follow
afford
international law. Israel
16
needs to
wars.
follow international law. That suggests that he thinks that Israel
Trust the plan, bigot.
Why would he be saying that if he felt that Israel was doing everything it needs to do to
Why would
prevent
Janet
saying
Yellen
it
say
from the
that
very
if it wasn't
beginning.
100% true?
That we want to see our good friend and partner abide by our shared commitments to the respect for civilian life and the respect for the law of war. We've been saying that since dang near the beginning of it.
I've never heard him say that Ukraine needs to follow international law. So
If
he
people
seems to be
start
making a
turning
point
on
that
Israel, maybe Ye can come back and we can have
Well, these are different concepts.
Yeezys
Yeezys.
back on the market
Ukraine was the victim
instead
of
of
a
2
massive
pair in my
invasion by a
closet
neighboring nation.
or some decent scratch.
And
There you
their
go.
military operations have been, with the
I
exception of the
mean,
counteroffensive, which
everybody
are
wants their Yeezys
largely
back, yo.
defensive in nature. It's a different situation than what the Israeli Defense Forces are doing inside Gaza, going after Hamas terrorists in a fairly aggressive way.
Question about the evacuees. The president said 70-something dual citizens were able to make it out today. How many days do you anticipate it will take to get all of the Americans who want to leave out of Gaza?
We don't know. I mean, as I said in my opening statement, we hope that that number can increase over coming days and we can get them all out very, very soon. Today's progress, I mean, yesterday it was 5, today so far, as you and I are speaking, it's 74. We're hoping that that number could increase throughout the day, hoping. So that's a good sign that the trajectory is going in the right direction. We want to get them all out.
How many random people do we have in
I
this
couldn't put a date on the calendar and tell you that's it.
tiny little shithole in the middle of
Deal that none
nowhere?
of them will stay in Egypt, that they'll all
Too many.
leave and go elsewhere?
That's going to be up to them. I mean,
What are they doing
they're
there?
free citizens. They're American citizens.
I don't think they know.
We've got families to look after, and that's why we're getting them all collected at the embassy in Cairo, and our consular staff.
No,
collected them,
you know, the Belt Road
verified all
Initiative
their
come out of
identities,
China,
got
heads
them on
from
buses,
India all
and
up to
now we're
Greece.
gonna be
I've
working on
pointed that
whatever
out several times. It has to be the reason
Some may not want that,
for this
but we'll
contention
we'll
in
work that out individually with each.
Israel. They need to pass this thing straight through their area, their territory, and it needs to be stable and settled for them to be able to do such a thing. So
I'll leave the
one
US
side or the other must go.
operations.
On the bilateral with the
They, they both really want to do the G word.
Border dispute come up, and what is the U.S. position on that?
The discussion around Haiti was largely over the security situation in Haiti and our
Haiti?
continued efforts to want to work with the international community to do what we can.
Why don't we just
to
bomb
counter
that place?
that insecurity and the violence, but also to work on ways throughout the region to provide relief to the Haitians.
Elizabeth OG says, I thought my fake country was kind of immune to the isolated against these things until recent events and protests. Yeah,
I mean,
as sad as it is.
If the events of 2020 didn't convince you,
Oh, geez.
Right.
welcome to the party. Sorry you're late.
No, right. If none of that and all of the coof and whatever else that has
The passing of His High
decimated
Holiness
our earth,
Saint Floyd of Fentanyl.
right? They don't want just a group or a part of a group. They want the world. They want the world, and that's what they're doing.
The whole world.
Terrorist organization, and Israel has an absolute right to go after them. But Qatar has lines of communication that not everybody else has, and it would be irresponsible. In fact, I would expect that you and everybody else in here would be going after me if we weren't doing everything we could and having every possible conversation we can have to get Americans that are held hostage back home with their families. If we weren't doing that, it would be diplomatic malpractice. Let me read something to you, if you don't mind.
You can read?
I think
Holy
I'll put
crap,
this in
Kirby, you're
here. Let me tell you what we're dealing with Hamas. Oh, geez, this is your notebook, Kareem. Sorry.
got some propaganda
This,
for you.
this fellow at Hamas, a guy named Ghazni Hamad, he did an interview a couple of days ago. He said, Israel's a country that has no place on our land. We must remove it because it constitutes a security, military, and political catastrophe to the Arab and Islamic nation and must be finished. We are not ashamed to say this with full force. We must teach Israel a lesson, and we will do this again and again. That's what the Israeli people are up against. And that's the group that are holding innocent Americans as well as 200 Ezra. And you're going to say, well, why are you talking to them? And why are you? No, I'm not. No, I'm not.
Why aren't we asking them to hand over the leader of this terrorist
We are
group?
working with Qatar to get our people out and to help get aid in. That's a priority right now.
That's
And
the priority.
obviously, we're
The
also
priority
working with
isn't
Israel
about getting the leader.
And as you push the Israelis
Nope.
To extinguish this group.
pauses,
I mean,
are they just
you
supposed to sit
cut off the
back
head, it just grows
and
5
Hamas
more, so.
attack them and attack them and attack them and not fight back?
We have been crystal clear that Israel has the right to defend themselves. I mean, my goodness,
So pause means they can still shoot back.
my goodness, Peter, we're giving them security assistance almost every day. But do we advocate pauses by both sides here, temporary, localized, to be able to get Americans out, to be able to get aid in? You betcha we do. That doesn't mean that we're calling for a general ceasefire. Hey, hang on a second. There's a difference. There's a big difference here. And we understand that, as I said earlier, humanitarian pauses have to be negotiated and you have to have a credible basis for doing it in a temporary, localized way. I would also expect that we would get a lot of criticism from you and from your network and others if we just eschewed the whole idea of some sort of temporary pause so that people couldn't get out. I mean, we're doing exactly what you should be doing to try to look after these folks.
So a pause does not help Hamas.
A temporary pause that's localized, that would allow us to get aid in and to get our people out.
Get him,
It's
Peter.
a good thing for the people of Gaza. It's a good thing
Mhm.
for the Americans that are being held hostage. And it's not going to stop Israel from defending itself because the security assistance we're providing continues to flow. And a temporary pause doesn't mean a general ceasefire where the war is over. It means pause only temporary for a specific purpose.
MJ, the temporary ceasefire that the president said he had convinced Prime Minister Netanyahu to put in place to get the Renans out. Can you tell us more about that? Was it localized? Was it for a short period of time? Just anything about the parameters of that?
No, I won't go into the details of that since we're going to be trying to see what we can do to get additional temporary pauses, humanitarian pauses in place. But in order to move hostages from where they were being held to safety, it does require a short pause in the fighting so that you can do it safely. I mean, why wouldn't you? I mean, it would be completely unsafe and irresponsible if you weren't trying to find some safe passage for a hostage that you got released while there's an area of combat going on.
Andrew, Admiral, earlier this week, you had said after the first airstrike in Jabalia that it's obvious to us that
I don't
Israel
think he
is
quite
trying
gets
to
it.
minimize civilian casualties.
No.
Now that you've had more
No, it
time
doesn't seem
see
to.
and assess the situation there, would you still say it's obvious that Israel is trying to minimize civilian casualties?
We see in the scope of their operations that they are making efforts to try to minimize civilian casualties. That does not mean, and I did not say, that they aren't still causing some, that their operations aren't still causing some. They are, and each one's tragic. Each one shouldn't happen, and we have been crystal clear about that.
Would you say with Jabalia specifically?
I'm not going to talk about a specific event.
But why not?
Because I'm not going to litigate an operational event that our military is not involved in almost real time. I'm just not going to do that, MJ. It would be inappropriate for me to do that from the White House podium.
Specifically on the question of minimizing civilian casualties, isn't an airstrike that targets a refugee camp or densely populated civilian area, isn't that sort of the definition of not minimizing civilian casualties?
That is a question for the Israeli Defense Forces. They should have to answer questions about the decisions they're making on the battlefield and how they're doing their targeting and how they're doing their operations. We're not gonna throw it in from the sidelines here, all the way in Washington D.C. I'll just tell you again what I've said 100 times already. We're having daily conversations with our Israeli counterparts about their thinking, about their plans, about their strategy, about the execution of that strategy, and continuing to urge them to do everything they can to minimize civilian casualties.
So on this, you wouldn't weigh in, even though the president and everyone on down said that the minimizing civilian casualties is incredibly important, that it's something that he is talking to his counterpart about all the time.
What I said was, I'm not going to weigh in from the podium and make public, provide public analysis in near real time of operations that U.S. forces aren't involved in.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Given the intensity of the IDF bombing across Gaza and reports that even areas that are considered to be safe passage are being targeted, is there any concern that Americans who want to get to Rafah can't get to Rafah? And then I have a second question.
I don't know what the status is of how many of all Americans in Gaza are down at Rafah. I just don't know. That's a better question for the State Department. I do know, we believe that the vast majority of American citizens who we know are in Gaza are down there. But I can't tell you with certitude that there's not family members elsewhere that haven't made their way down or can't make their way down. The other thing I can tell you is I know the State Department is in direct contact with all the American families in Gaza and keeping them informed, particularly those that are coming up on the lists for departure. They're being notified where to go, when to be there. And as far as I know, and again, a better question for the State Department, that there isn't, that we aren't aware of American families that are trying to get down there and can't. But again, that's a better question for my colleagues.
My second question, the Independent has reviewed a list of the 400 Americans who have been cleared to leave by the Egyptians, the Israelis, and so forth. There have been prior reports that there were, I believe, between 500 and 700 Americans in Gaza. So I'm just curious about this discrepancy. There are 400 cleared to leave. If there are several hundred more in Gaza, is there a reason that they have not been cleared to leave? Have they not asked? Are they?
Maybe they don't want to.
And why then?
Hey, you said the quiet part out loud. Maybe they have a reason to be there.
Allowed to exit.
So what you're talking about a rolling process here. I think our estimate is somewhere between 1,000 and 1,200 U.S. citizens, and that includes, dual nationals and legal permanent residents and family members. So then the pool is somewhere in that number, somewhere there, about 400 families. But this is a rolling process of getting folks out. So
I'm confused on when he says "and family members," why he words it that way.
We expect that the rest of them will get through that.
He means people who aren't citizens.
John, I have a question on the Islamophobia strategy.
Aren't our responsibility.
On Gaza. In London, the vice president said that every Gaza.
But a lot of these people who are U.S. citizens
Does the president agree, and how will the U.S. ensure that Israel
have
will allow this?
foreign national families because
President in London said that every Gazan who wants to go back after the war
of naturalization and
to do that. Does the president agree, and how will ensure that
dual
Israel will
citizenship.
allow this?
Of course, I've said this before. It's nothing new. But if a citizen of Gaza finds themselves outside of Gaza and they want to go back to their home, yeah, we absolutely support that, and we'll work with partners in the region to make it happen.
And on still on Gaza, this week Israel released intelligence showing Hamas taking fuel from the Indonesian hospital in Gaza. It appears with the knowledge of the hospital's director. Is this something that you can confirm?
Nope.
On Islamophobia, some of the Muslim leaders that I spoke with said that while they appreciate the effort to combat Islamophobia, they thought the timing of the announcement was interesting because this is something that the administration has been working on for months, And some of them feel that this is a political bone thrown at them and does not address their bigger concern, which is U.S. policy to support Israel, where they are frustrated that their perspectives are not being heard. Your message to them.
This is a very genuine effort on behalf of the president, the vice president, the entire administration to plant a marker about how hate has no business here in the United States, particularly hate that can lead to real threats of violence against the Muslim community, the Arab community, Palestinian community.
Fun.
We take that seriously. This
What about the Jews?
into leading up to this strategy is long-standing and predates the events of October 7th. But again, I don't know who all these folks are
Five
necessarily,
watching.
but we value their opinion.
Bump
we
that
value
like
their
button.
perspective.
Yeah.
We're gonna do more than just this.
Even especially if it's
Hopefully, thank God.
they feel it's a contrary.
Oh, we're gonna do more than just this. This is what's currently going on.
Yeah, this is our warm up. We get to listen to.
This is currently live. This isn't
Here's
like,
my
oh, we're watching
question.
something that was aired earlier.
Here's my question, Mr. Frog.
Yeah, what's that?
This man is an admiral.
Uh-huh.
Do you think this man has ever seen a day of live combat in his life?
Is that an accurate assessment? How would you respond?
Because you have reached the top rank of the Navy as an admiral. Like,
This strategy born from a genuine desire to go after.
You would almost hope that
that could lead to
he
real
did.
threats of violence against
you would almost hope that he didn't.
fellow citizens who are of the Muslim faith.
At the same time, right? He kind of
Palestinian community. I mean, that comes from a genuine
admiral. So I mean,
place for
this is the National Security Council guy, the NSC, the coordinator. So I mean, he's really.
I want to go back to what you said about your conversations with the Israelis and trying to encourage them.
He's still admiral.
You're
Still
trying to
admiral.
encourage the lessons that the U.S. has learned.
I don't trust it.
And would the U.S. be able to
Ooh.
help Israel in pinpointing its targeting precisely to avoid the casualties, for instance, of 195 that were killed at Jabalia? I mean, what do you have to offer? What can you offer? How can you help Israel minimize casualties?
I mean, look, we have a lot of experience in what's called urban warfare.
Do we?
In Iraq, Afghanistan. You think about Mosul,
I
you
th-
think about Fallujah.
Okay. I mean, yeah.
One of the reasons why we
urban.
Our track record ain't the best.
to Israel not long ago was to share some lessons learned about how you conduct operations against a terrorist network inside an urban environment such that you are minimizing damage to civilian infrastructure and absolutely minimizing loss of life to innocent people. And there are things you can do on the ground that you can't do from the air, particularly if you have good intelligence. And so I think those were the kind of conversations that we were having with our Israeli counterparts. And on your second question, I mean, there's no plan or intention for the United States to get involved in the targeting process. These are Israeli military operations, and the Israeli Defense Force. They're leaders. They're making these decisions. They're executing these operations. What we are doing
They sound more
is
like the
making sure that
Israeli
we are
attack
giving them
force.
the tools, including perspective and advice,
Right.
but also weapons to be able to conduct these operations in the most efficient way possible, and in a way that, again, minimizes civilian harm.
If the U.S. is providing weapons that are intended to minimize harm, but then we see large civilian casualties in places like Jabalia, does the U.S. bear some responsibility by providing the weapon?
We are not making the targeting decisions. The Israeli Defense Force are making the decisions. we are giving them the tools and capabilities.
Stop blaming the gun,
themselves against
you
what I just
stupid,
read as a pretty
stupid
dire, chilling threat.
lefty.
I mean, these guys want to wipe them off the map. They don't believe they even have a right to exist. They have every right. In fact, they have a responsibility that are people to go after these folks, and we're trying to give them the tools and capabilities to do that. But in addition to it, is
I was just kind of looking through Kirby's wiki. It's like in October 2014, Senator John McCain disputed Kirby's contention that the U.S. was winning its war against ISIS and called him an idiot.
Oh, well, I mean, that's a very low bar. I mean, good old brain tumor McCain.
You know, all 10 years ago, you know, he was still just doing the same thing that he's doing now. He's really not been doing much different.
I mean,
he did that. He was because he's the press secretary for the Pentagon. So being that he's press secretary, that's why he's here.
Right.
It's because he's the press secretary for the Pentagon. So being that he's press secretary for the Pentagon for Joe Biden, as well as for Barack Obama.
How they handle that. I don't know.
Only recently.
I know of other nations that have.
When was this?
Their Israeli ambassadors.
May 28th, 2022. Did he actually get promoted to the National Security Council Coordinator for Strategic Communications? So it's like,
This might be repeating something, but I just
we're gonna take your job and we're gonna promote you so that way you can do a lot more.
That sounds like the spying bureau.
Is spreading more information.
Ah, the propaganda, the Ministry of Truth.
Yes,
we're promoting you to the Ministry of Truth.
Already put out there publicly. We were able to help negotiate the release of those 2 Americans, and that's a good thing. And in order to be able to get folks out, you got to make sure they can do it safely, and that's what the president was referring to.
Admiral, switching gears from Gaza to Israel's northern border, tomorrow Hezbollah's leader is expected to make his first public comments since the war broke out, and the group has said that it mounted 19 simultaneous strikes on Israeli forces just today using guided missiles and other weapons. So what does the White House expect to hear from Hezbollah's leader tomorrow? And if the goal of the administration was to prevent a wider war, isn't that starting to happen with so many engagements with Israeli forces already?
Well, we'll wait to see what he says. I mean, I don't think he's calling in asking for our talking points, so we'll see what he has to say. Our message to him and anybody else is that if they're thinking about widening and escalating deep in this conflict, you shouldn't do it. We've got significant national security interests at play here. We've proven in the past we'll protect and defend them. We'll do it again in the future.
But how concerning is it that there have been consistent engagement with Israeli forces?
Obviously, we're concerned about continued attacks on Israeli forces there in the north, as are the Israelis. But I don't believe we've seen any indication yet specifically that Hezbollah is ready to go in full force. So we'll see what he has to say.
Oh, okay.
Thank you so much.
I mean,
Mr. Kirby, as you know,
Do they have to go in full force for them to do something?
I mean, they are kind of just saber rattling right now. That's the point. They're not doing anything. They're just kind of saber rattling at this point, which is what pretty much everyone is doing at this current junction.
We let Pakistan speak to their policies with respect to.
Now, the Taliban, on the other hand,
We want to see all nations do what they can.
if they could just get passage through Iraq, they said they would go conquer Israel.
With respect to Afghans who are trying to flee.
Thanks a lot, Green. John, over the past 3 weeks, you've expressed from the podium your opposition to a ceasefire. Now you're advocating for a humanitarian pause. That's the way you described it. What's the difference between the two, and is it a two-way street? Is a humanitarian pause one in which there would be essentially no fighting from the Hamas side at the same time that there's no fighting from the Israeli side?
So a couple of things here. First, you said now we're advocating. This is something we've been talking about now for several days. In fact, Secretary Blinken brought it up at the UN, believe late last week. I mean, this is not some new idea that we're just introducing into the into the intellectual pool here today. And I'll repeat it again. When we talk about a general ceasefire, we're talking about a stoppage of fighting all across the front, if you will, all across the battle space, where neither side, everybody lays down their arms, and it's a general ceasefire. Usually, when you're talking about a general ceasefire, it is about trying to find a cessation to the hostilities, to try to get to a truce, right? Or to some sort of end of the war. That's what we mean by a general ceasefire. We aren't advocating for a general ceasefire at this point. As I said earlier, we believe that a general ceasefire would benefit Hamas in providing them breathing space and time to continue to plot and execute attacks on the Israeli.
So
people.
you want them to
Humanitarian
not
problems,
ceasefire. You want them to
talk about
continue
that.
to fight.
It is temporary, localized, and focused on
We want them to pause, but then fight.
objective or
But
objective
pause.
humanitarian aid
But
that
fight.
Well,
collapse.
I'm with Elizabeth
There is a
OG.
pause,
She said
and it would have
intellectual
to be
pool.
negotiated
LOL. Right.
The
That's
the
general
exactly
pause is
what I
just to
thought.
let them come in
in
to
that
take the
geographic
certain
space
people out that they want,
for that
those
limited time.
Americans and their
There would
families.
be
And to bring in the
cessation
aid
of
for
hostilities
definitely
that
not
would allow
Hamas. It's
what it
definitely
is
for
we're
the
trying to allow. Does that make sense? Does that
Philistiner
lay it out?
people. Right.
Most of your professional life in the military, I don't know the answer to this question. Was there a time in the U.S. fight against Al Qaeda in which the U.S. implemented humanitarian clauses?
I'm not aware of any. But I would remind you that Al Qaeda, wasn't in possession of 200 hostages in Iraq or Afghanistan. And it's a different situation.
Are you sure these are
That's
actually
what we're talking
all
about.
hostages? That's my problem.
Thank you. Senator Durbin became the first U.S. senator to call for
No, but it's a good
Do you have any
narrative.
response to that? I know you have said that that would benefit Hamas. Is there an analysis about how
There's
long
some number of hostages, and they could potentially be this number. So we're gonna go with this number.
Well, there's no change to our view right now that a ceasefire is not in the best interest of the Israeli people and the Israeli government, who are trying to protect those people. That's where we are.
Secondly, about the communications blackout in Gaza, you spoke about this a few days ago. You said that the U.S. played a role in getting that reversed.
Yeah.
There was another report about a blackout yesterday. Is it the U.S. position that communications blackouts, cutting off internet, cutting off phone access, is against U.S. policy for Gaza at this point?
There are times in military operations where you want to limit your enemy's ability to communicate. And we've seen that in the war in Ukraine. Both Russia and Ukraine trying to limit each other's ability to communicate, and sometimes that means in the execution of that task that you're also shutting down sectors of the public communication vehicles. So I can't sit here and tell you that in warfare either side might see benefit in doing that, and a legitimate need to do that, to shut down an enemy's ability to communicate amongst itself, move its forces around, make decisions, execute command and control. But in this particular case, we felt that such a blackout was specifically hampering the ability to get humanitarian assistance, and then hampering the ability of humanitarian agencies to communicate with their people on the ground, to try to solve a level of desperation that we just haven't seen in a very, very long time. And so we did not believe that it should continue, and we did have a hand in helping get it stopped.
Michael?
Thanks. John, on the subject of hostages, Hamas says that at least 7 were killed in these Israel strikes on this Jabalia refugee camp, including at least 3 with foreign passports. Does the U.S. think those numbers are accurate? And of those 3, do you know if any of them were Americans?
No, sir. I don't have any information to verify those claims.
Thank you. I wanted to ask a quick question about Ukraine and then a follow-up to something you said previously. In an interview with The Economist, Ukraine's top commander acknowledged that his forces are locked in what he called stalemate. And he went on to say that there's no chance that a significant breakthrough in the front there is imminent. Obviously, the president continues to say that the United States will stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes. But is there, in the months and years ahead, is there going to be a updated strategy required? Perhaps more advanced weapons, or perhaps more of an appetite for negotiations?
Well, certainly we'll let
I'm thinking
Ukraine
surrender.
speak to their progress or lack thereof. That's really for them to talk about. I think it underscores how important it is that we continue to support Ukraine. I can't stand here today and tell you that it's going to lead to this particular weapon system or this new capability. We are evolving and have evolved, provided Ukraine, the war itself has evolved, and I suspect that it would be eminently easier for us to do that if Congress would pass the supplemental funding that supports Ukraine, because it's not
No.
only about
Oh.
capabilities for
No.
Ukraine. There's a big chunk of that goes to replenishment ability for U.S. For our own inventory.
Oh, sure,
We,
sure it does.
well,
Mhm.
we should probably do that, but
Israel only
stop the
bill.
giving
You also
them
noted
it.
that each of those
Just
four
replenish it for
categories,
ourselves and
whether
then
they were Ukraine, Indo-Pacific, the border, and Israel, they were all critical, and that's the point of supplemental. That you do it as the need occurs. So can you kind of take us into the president's mindset here? Why not triage this, and as you have opportunities to meet those critical needs, why not take them as they come rather than wait and try and deal with them all at once?
I think in our statement of administration policy, we laid out very clearly why we wouldn't want to do that and why we think that all of the things we've asked for in the supplemental are important. And let's go back on the Israel only thing. The way the House Republicans have carved this out is no humanitarian assistance. It only goes to security assistance for Israel, and that's got to be a non-starter. I mean, that's nothing more than partisan politics right there. I mean, here we are. I've been taking I don't know how many questions about civilian casualties and the desperation of the people in Gaza. I mean, it's incorrigible that anybody would think that we wouldn't need some additional funding to help get food, water, and medicine to these people. They didn't cause this. They didn't ask for that. Hamas doesn't represent them. They're victims too, and they need that.
is that food, water, and
I've
medicine
made a
getting
mess
to
of
them?
your whole. Let me just clean up here. I think it's just right. I've got all my. No, I did.
They make a mess?
I think that's better.
It's okay. Thanks. I do want to touch on something that the Admiral was asked about, and just want to add to what he said as it relates to our strategy when it comes to making sure that no hate of any kind,
Of
is
course, this
allowed
is what you would want
any
to
light
touch
of
on.
day in this country, right? And that's including Islamophobia, certainly anti-Semitism, and one of the things that the Admiral was saying that I just wanted to add to is in December, as you all know,
She was
December
feeling a
last
little
year,
racist. She
the
needed to
president
throw
established
something
a
in there.
interagency
Right.
task force to address anti-Semitism, to address Islamophobia and related forms of hate. And the first order of business when we did that a year ago was to release a strategy on combating anti-Semitism. And I know all of you reported, so many of you reported on this. There was 100 actions that agencies were able to take to counter the scourge of anti-Semitism. And then the next step was developing counter Islamophobia. And so that's what you're seeing, and that's what this is the president's commitment. He ran on this, as you all know.
This
Okay,
isn't
now shut up.
progressive enough. There was no LGBTQ
Ensure
hate in there.
that no hate sees the light of day, to continue to fight against that type of hatred, and that includes all types of hatred.
Hi,
That includes
Puffer.
Islamophobia, that includes anti-Semitism. And
What's up,
this is an
Puffer?
administration that's taken action, not just
This woman just makes more problems.
over the last
Yeah.
couple months, but started this process back in December of last year. So just wanted to make that
Yeah, she's a
super clear,
bad
and
person.
that's been our approach here, the president's approach and this administration's approach here.
On Tuvalu, does the White House believe that the Reed Cinema resolution is a way out of the blockade?
I mean, look, and we have said this. We're certainly not going to speak to the procedure of how the Senate operates. That is not for us to do, but we will continue to be crystal clear and very, very loud about what Tuberville is doing. It's just shameful. It is dangerous. It is shameful. I think the admiral did a great
Oh.
job laying out of how that's affecting some of our key critical service members. And we're talking about 380 service or positions that are
Good to see you too.
that are at risk, or that no one knows where they're going to go. Right? No one knows what's happening, and we're talking about families too. That affects their
Oh, people know what's happening.
So this is not a way to keep our country
They ain't
safe.
dumb.
It's not a way to move
Yeah.
forward with our national security.
We see all our military assets and where they're moving to.
Very proud to see Republican senators speak up. As I did at the top, I laid out just direct quotes from them and how this is not.
Remember how happy and thrilled she was when she got the job? Oh yeah.
What we're seeing.
She's so giddy.
And then on the mayors, I guess there were a couple of mayors who came.
I know the volume on the video is really low, but I have it turned up all the way, and my sound on my PC is completely up. So
How the meeting went and what they talked about.
So a couple of things. They met with the White House Chief
I
of Staff,
don't know.
Jeff Zients. They also met with Senior Advisor Tom Perez and other White House
Coming out,
DHS
correct?
officials.
Yeah.
DHS officials, obviously, who representatives from Chicago and Denver to discuss
Philly.
manage what they're dealing with.
I don't disagree
And so this is
with
something
any of that statement.
about part of the conversation.
Hey, what's up,
the
Ellie?
importance of the presidential supplemental funding request, which also
She's a
includes
diversity hire.
Stuff done. I truly dislike her.
work to accelerate
Yes, she was.
the process of
Just like Kamala Harris.
her to speak from
Yeah.
From here many times for eligible
And
and so we're going to partnership. We're going to continue to have those conversations.
I don't want to get the name incorrect. Jumanji Brown
It's not
Jackson.
the first. There have been many others. And so look, we're gonna
Yes, close enough. Yes, Ketanji Brown Jackson.
we say, that if Republicans truly care about border security, this is something, as we talked about the national security supplemental, we know that's included. Then
Jumanji.
Thank you. You just mentioned that representatives from
My
Chicago and
bad.
Denver were here. There was reporting that Mayor Adams from New York was on his way and then turned around.
I find it all funny.
Do you have any more information about that? And also, did any other representative from New York join that meeting?
So I believe a staff from the mayor's office was in the room for this meeting. I cannot speak for the mayor's schedule. That is something that I would have to refer you to his office. But you saw the reports. I just can't speak to. Obviously, I can't speak to his schedule and why he could not attend.
And completely different. A government shutdown is about 2 weeks away. If something doesn't happen.
Government shutdown, government shutdown, government
The
shutdown.
speaker today was talking about something called a lab.
She says about because it's 12 days away.
What is the White House
Yeah.
on that?
She said about 2 weeks. I mean,
Been clear when we were here the last time, close to a government shutdown that thankfully was avoided. And look, they have 2 weeks. Congress has 2 weeks to do their jobs. As you just stated, they have 2 weeks to honor their word.
please,
And you know when she's lying because her lips are moving.
please don't do your job,
When he signed the last
Congressers.
resolution, he said there's no excuse for another crisis. There really isn't. That's our message to them. There is no excuse for another crisis. They have to do their job, and they have to honor.
You all
avoid
benefit no more than you do under a crisis at any other point in time.
Different
It's
agencies would have different
very much in your benefit for there to be another crisis. That's why this shit's all 11th hour shit now.
They have to make sure that they avoid a government shutdown. They're not going to get ahead of whatever process they're going to move forward with. The president wants to see them avoid a government shutdown.
Did you check that, Frog, if there's closed captioning
They're able to do their job.
on this video?
Oh, I suppose they're probably.
Senator Menendez
It's worth
attend
a
a classified briefing
peek
on
anyway.
Ukraine yesterday, given that he's been accused of aiding a foreign government.
So look, and I've said this before, we
Blame C-SPAN.
very serious.
Yeah.
you know, the investigations. We
C-SPAN need a YouTube channel.
take them very seriously. I don't have anything to say about to comment about the you know, the meeting that he attended, the classified meeting that he attended. Just not going to get into that from here, but obviously we take this very
And no, C-SPAN's gay.
Yeah, just wanted
Yeah,
to follow up on the
clearly.
Islamophobia question. With this initiative, are you going to be reviewing laws and regulations that are in place across the U.S. government that are targeted at Muslims and
Trump
you know, none of
delivers
those that are
remarks in
on the
Houston
state
when?
level? Do you see
At
some
one?
of those measures
Oh no.
rescinded?
That's
In what
like
kind of
20 minutes from now.
So look, we're definitely going to. One thing I can say was we're going to.
Well, I'm not over on Rumble right now, so
Community leaders, advocates, and members of
I'm
Congress.
just here
Yeah,
over
that's true.
on this YouTube side. What's up, KLI?
Forward with the strategy.
Right, exactly. What the fuck,
You know,
C-SPAN?
this is something that the entire administration
Yeah.
takes very seriously, and make sure that every American has the freedom to live their lives. And certainly, we can get more. We can get you more specifics on what this is going to. The strategy is going to look like, the breakdowns, and the agencies that are going to be involved. And I can't speak to specifics of investigations or penalties of that nature. But this is the beginning of it, and certainly this is something. Like I said, the first step was of order of business was back in May when we released the strategy on combating anti-Semitism, and this is the next steps. And certainly, we will have more to share as the days go by.
And on Maine,
We'll share this one. Oops, wrong one. We'll go to YouTube.
Did you find C-SPAN's got a YouTube channel doing the same thing? But
on Maine.
No,
in Maine,
White House.
louder. Oh, White House. Yeah, that they do have a YouTube channel. And
Visits are difficult.
audio sounds a lot better.
The president. Are you planning to, after this latest shooting, is there any action that you're planning in terms of maybe bringing people together again, local
Is that better?
The incident,
Yes.
sorry, the tragedy
Much.
in Maine.
It almost feels like it's
did
too loud.
cause Representative Golden to change his view on an assault
Well-
weapons ban. Are you seeing any other lawmakers?
It's awesome when you can turn it
change
down,
their
but
view?
it sucks when you
And will
can't
there
turn
be
it
any
up.
kind of a summit or gathering?
There's a lot that you're asking in that question there, Andrea, and all very good questions. Look, one of the things that was so important for the office to be created, the office in preventing gun violence, obviously one of the I guess
They do.
pillars to that office is making sure that
They
all of the
don't.
executive orders
It's
Unavailable.
unavailable at the
is
moment.
accelerated, right? That we move really much faster on getting what the president signed.
Usually they do.
Out
That's
there
why
to
they
the
have the
states and
interpreter.
obviously to Americans who are suffering and just
Um,
communities out there who are suffering, but also to make sure
I
that
believe they don't put the
the
words up
law
just in
that was
case they
the
need
bipartisan
to
law also gets
Edit them.
moved out very
edit
quickly.
something later.
But one of the things that we've been providing, and these are the things that we'll continue to provide to communities, is as I mentioned, Greg Jackson is on the ground. He's working with FBI and DOJ to coordinate
Well,
with victim
sometimes
services,
the
deploying experts from the
auto-generated
newly created
captions
mass shooting
get it very,
Resource
very
Center.
wrong.
That's something that we're doing. We're coordinating with the Department of Education and HUD to support school reopening strategy, because that was obviously really important as the schools had to shut down, and emergency housing as needed throughout the region. So there are a lot of steps that we're doing that is part of this office that's going to help the community on the ground as it relates to Congress. Look, we've been very clear. The president has done more than 24 taken more than 24 executive actions to deal with gun violence. We believe there is more. This cannot be what we're seeing in Maine and other places. Cannot be the norm, right? And so we've been very clear that more needs to be done. We've been very clear on that, and we've asked Congress to take legislative action in order to truly deal If they want to save lives, that's what they need to do. They need to pass an assault weapons ban, enact universal background checks, require safe storage of guns, and immunity from liability for gun manufacturers. And across the country, we must adopt, strengthen the red flag laws. And that is something that we see the Department of Justice taking action and creating a model red flag
Did you
legislation
see Somalia?
can move
Yeah.
forward. So there's a lot of work to be done here, a lot of work. And it started here with the 24 executive action. Obviously, there was
Hard
a
of hearing and
bipartisan
deaf and
legislation that's
auditory
now law that
processing
the president signed
disabilities. Not
last year. Now
everyone
we need more legislation. That's
knows
what we need to
ASL.
really to really
Yeah.
truly save lives.
The governor.
Maybe to
has-
the
Of course,
non-attendees in the room, I'm just
that's what
asking.
the
The
that's what
governor
some
has started an
spotlight
investigation now
on
into mistakes. Is the federal government able
the
to
mass
provide any
shootings is
assistance
for.
in that? Are you
For
troubled
that.
by the reports that we've heard that so many clues were missed? And there was a call this morning about $334 million going into community policing and
She
mental
blows
health
so
task
hard she
force
should be
and things like
straight.
that. Is there any funding that you're thinking about making available to help local law enforcement do better in terms of identifying potential shooters?
So the commission to probe that the
Who's
governor
that
announced,
guy?
we believe, of course, that the community needs answers. And so this is going to be something, obviously, that we support. And the president has told the governor,
She must need to go
since
pee.
the strategy unfolded, that Maine has its full backing from the entire federal family, and will provide resources. And obviously, the Department of Justice, the FBI is on hand to assist in any way. And don't want to, they're still investigating, as you know. You just mentioned we're hearing things, but obviously law enforcement is still investigating. Don't want to get ahead of that. But we are here to offer resources, and of course,
This
we
guy seems a
support
lot calmer
the
than the
governor's
lady.
efforts to get to the bottom of what occurred on the ground, this horrific tragedy. Karen, you're going to be the last one.
Thanks, Karine. And back on the mayors, you mentioned the supplemental funding request that you guys have sent up to Congress, but they say that $1.4 billion isn't enough to help them deal with the influx of migrants. They're asking for $5 billion. Would the administration consider boosting that amount? And what was the response from those senior officials in that meeting to the request?
His glasses show a weird reflection from the screen that's in front of him that he's reading.
And obviously,
Yeah.
With these city
Of
city
things
mayors
that
and
he's
others
saying,
across the country as they're
and
dealing,
the fingers that
dealing
he's
with the
using.
influx of migrants
Mhm.
in their
The
city.
actions on
I'm
his
not gonna
face
get
are
into,
less
like, specifics of what
expressive
came out.
than
What I know
what
was
the
what the
lady's was.
agenda, what we
She
what
was
going
much
into
more frantic.
agenda on
Mhm.
to
Well, I
discuss,
mean, but
and
she's
what
more
we believe
expressive.
is important
Right,
is
exactly.
we
That's
do
these
need that
ones that
1.4
know how to
billion.
read it,
That's what we
read the
believe is needed.
face
It's
as well as
emergency,
just the
as you know,
hands. So
emergency
it's
funding that we put forward in the supplemental, that we believe it's important for our
kind
national
of
security. It's
interesting.
important for what we're
He's
trying
very
to do with
calm.
these communities. I can't speak to the 5 billion. I'm not sure what else they're asking on top of the 1.4 billion, so can't speak to that. I can only speak to what we have requested in the supplemental funding to Congress, and that's what we believe is urgent, is needed. And we have said, we've been very clear, if House Republicans are serious in dealing with this border security, this is something that they should move forward with easily. But what we've seen them do over and over again is play political games. And so this is an opportunity for them to
Well, that's
show
how your supplemental
in a real
security
way
package
that they want to
highlights.
deal
I
with
wouldn't vote for
the
that
issues that
either.
we're seeing at the border. All right, guys. See you next week. Thank you. See you on the
You wanted all that money to help
Ouch! She said.
facilitate
That was quick. She just
border
cut out. She
insecurity.
just cut it off.
Yeah.
She's done that a couple times. Yesterday when she did it, she actually got called out for it because there's a guy from New York Post that had a question. She didn't call on him. And he's like, he said something about the fourth leading newspaper not being asked to call question, and she just kept on walking. It's like, yeah, well, she don't give a shit. She gets to do what she wants. We've been very clear. Is her version of Saki's circle back? Yeah, sort of. I'll direct you to that, or the I'll direct you to. I'll direct you to. I'll direct you to. I direct you to go here. I direct you to go there because she doesn't answer anything usually. Don't all of the political parties play games? Yes. When you can't speak to anything, you just make the people trust you less. Great
No,
job, word genius.
they're the most transparent administration ever, and I believe that. Because all administrations lie to your face, but some try to make it sound believable. They are transparently lying to your face and daring you to do anything about it.
Someone should meme her and put "fuck the shit, I'm out."
Fuck this shit, I'm out.
So, let's see here.
I almost miss Sarah Huckabee Sanders, Puffer, so that's how sad this is. And she was painfully, dreadfully awful at the job. Do you remember that, Frog?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Were you covering the news back when Sarah Sanders was White House press secretary?
No.
I didn't think so. Kayleigh McEnany was doing the job when you came into the business.
Correct. Correct.
Yeah. But God, that woman was awful at the job and still better than the last two.
Yeah, these last two are just trash. It's so bad. Oh, are they?
She just hates French people. That's all.
Okay, so these
That's
promotions
perfectly
that,
okay.
these promotions that come out of the Senate.
Yeah.
There's
Tiny
been an
Tuber.
issue. There's been an issue because of Tuberville, right?
Yeah.
You've heard of this?
Yep.
Right? So, because of the issue with Tuberville, oh, it covers the number. Gonna have to edit that.
Yeah. Make us
Bring
a
that up
little
just a little
smaller
bit.
or move me to the other corner.
No, we got you.
There we go.
There you go. So, there's one person that's been holding up all these nominations. Some 300 plus. Some say 600. If you depends on where you look. Now, you need to have for these nominations to go through. You need to have 100. All of them, all 100 of them, say yes. One no stops it. And Tuberville's been saying no. Now, they really are hoping that they can get a couple of these nominations through. If they can get this one through, and a couple other higher ranked ones that need to be pushed through, confirmed, they can actually start doing things that they want to do. They need some of these confirmations to occur for some of these other deployments to happen because you get some movement.
Dude, do you know how many he's held up so far? Because I saw a number earlier and I can't confirm it, but
It said what 362? Is that what she said?
something like that.
So
So
I'd seen a number at one point in time saying that there was some 600 that were being held up.
I saw a number that was like 143 critical appointments.
Right. And that's the difference between the numbers is how critical, how important they really are to be put into place. Some of these
143
obviously it's a little bit
is a
more
lot.
than others, like this person, Lieutenant General Christopher Mahoney, Marine Corps Assistant Commandant nomination. So I mean, these positions, these are high-ranking positions. They need to be filled. So that way he can do his job correctly and fill all the positions that are down below him, get everybody ranked up. So that way they can commence
War 3.
with World War III. Yes.
Tim Pool
Is
was
C-SPAN too
finally
closed
right.
caption?
Probably
Let me see
not.
if
I mean, nobody on C-SPAN's even saying anything. There's no words to be hearing, so. This is interesting. Doesn't seem like this has a caption option either.
it just says off. I think if hold on here, let me see something here. If I go to Congress, I think Congress actually does. Go to Senate floor. It's
What a
take that
fucking
one
kid I
down.
peddling about.
Sure. This one.
Oh, they're
See, it
doing
looks a little
dates.
different. Looks a little different. This one's actually
It's got
Senate.gov.
It has a graphic.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's got a different graphic. It says the same damn thing, except it doesn't have the counter on it. We
And
want
they
to see the
really
numbers.
seriously aren't saying much right now.
Yeah.
There you go. There's you can see the clerk.
Yep.
You can see the clerk's words down below. Maybe not. Let me change this.
Ms. Cantwell, aye.
There you go.
Doing a vote. We still don't have the numbers though. Like we have
Now you
on
should be able to
Tuesday.
see all those words down below. But there's not much that's going on right now. She's calling roll. You don't get to see, and that's the reason that I like the C-SPAN over. You don't get to see the actual number. You see the graphic is different. So
The number better.
just can't well. I think I wonder if he Tuberville actually went to the point of voting yes, because I think that no usually comes up fairly early.
Mr. Coons, aye.
Yep, C-SPAN back up on another screen so I can see the number.
I say the number is more important than knowing.
1 o'clock.
The nine-
Looks like the Trump's 14th Amendment hearing, day 4, part 3, just went live.
On C-SPAN?
Yep.
Yeah. They're back from lunch then.
Yep. So it currently says 86-0 on this particular count for Mr. Mahoney.
Yeah.
Ooh, even better. Can it be side-by-side broadcast? Now, I wish. Looks like Congress by you, PETA.
Yeah, it'd be dope if we could just have 30 screens and just be watching everything in a small screen.
Put numbers, people start voting. Maybe.
Well, they're voting right now on this nomination, so
They need 14 more to confirm this nomination. So it's not that he's appointed; he's confirmed to be nominated, right?
yeah.
It's like YouTube deleted your little sweet nothings, huh? Really? YouTube asshole. Sounds good. We'll be here, or I'll be here for a little bit anyway. I want to know about this nomination for sure. Might actually go check out the Trump thing. I wish I could put both up at the same time. That'd be good.
Yeah, I wish we could have just have like 30 screens going and then just like bring them up. Like have a little security
KLS is
camera
back
layout.
to work. Oh, no.
Oh man, everyone's leaving. Chores and work and all of that.
Those things that people do during the day.
People with real lives.
Oh no. That's so bad. Don lost? Why you lost, Buffer? What's wrong? Still says 86. Come on, call the next name. Really? Take that long to take roll? You remember? Huh? I didn't understand KLA's last comment. They were just stupid today. Back to work. See y'all.
I think she means the part about him, about YouTube deleting the little sweet nothings. YouTube didn't delete it, in my opinion, though. It says, Puffer, are you a masochist? I can call you more insults if you like. And Puffer, obviously you're homophobic or racist, and racist or something. Don't be a homophobic racist.
Yeah, and I don't see any other sweet nothings. See, Carola, you have to come back. You have to come back. She was enjoying your company.
Yeah. Well, chat just kind of all left at once, and poor Puffer's been abandoned all on her own.
She's like, I'm here. Squab.
Skaboobles?
Puffer dressed as an angel for All Hallows. Because, you know. Yeah, sure she was.
Mm.
YouTube said that I called Puffer the sweetest little bigot
And
misogynist to her.
misogynist, yeah. Yeah, I definitely didn't see that one, so something must have got it. Don't be a bijou. What do you think is keeping the other people from doing the voting?
They just have to. I don't know. I don't get what takes so long.
Are they out for lunch or something?
No, they're not. They're all still standing right here. It just doesn't make any sense why it takes so long to get a. You think that you'd just push this through? Okay, let's go.
Mm-hmm. Just vote, W.
There you go. The yeas are 86. The nays are 0.
Yeah. It's still the same number it was last time you updated it.
No, he's gonna talk.
The yeas are 86. The nays are 0. The nomination is confirmed. Number four. Under the previous order, the motion to reconsider is considered made and laid upon the table, and the president will be immediately notified of the Senate's action.
So they nominate and the president has to confirm, right?
Mr. President?
The senator from Illinois.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've come to the floor today to honor one of the fiercest advocates for Illinois I've ever known, Cameron Youst. I've had the privilege of working with Cameron for the past 7 years now, and over that time, she has been my state director, my campaign manager, my sounding board, and perhaps most importantly, my friend. It's hard to find the words to express what Cam has meant to both my office and to me. She is an expert in everything from the nuanced politics of Illinois' smallest towns to the full range of Hill House.
I'm gonna turn her down just a little. She's loud.
She can
Very
tell you
loud.
every detail of how the latest bill for a vote here in DC will affect Chicago.
So they went ahead and they confirmed that nomination, confirming the nomination for military nominees to go ahead and announce it to the president.
But most of all, she is our team's moral compass. You know, all too often when people think of
It's
American
kind of
service,
interesting that this is being allowed to be
but
pushed
the truth
through.
is, service in this country isn't just limited to picking up a rifle to defend our
I want to know
democracy.
what Tuberville
American service
actually
also
did.
means picking
I'm
up
going
a
to take
soup
the
spoon to
screen
feed
down.
the less fortunate.
I want to know what it is that Tuberville actually did.
Maybe he didn't show up.
If he got.
Maybe they locked him in a closet somewhere so he couldn't vote.
What's up, Gohagen? Let's bring up. Let's see how this goes over. Turn just a touch so we can talk over it. There you go.
Happy Thursday. Go Hagen.
A senator who agreed, and I believe it was Ted Cruz who agreed on that, and the objection was proper, and so the Senate then went back to their chambers to debate.
They don't have.
Started the process of debate.
They don't have closed caption.
Okay. So were you in the House as part of that debate?
I was in the House. It was unclear to me whether I would be speaking or not.
Why is he so quiet?
COVID, and so the House had rules on
It's his microphone.
how many seats had to be between each member when they're on the House. There were actually members in the gallery, so it was people were very spread out. But my guess is there were only probably about half the members were actually in the House on the House floor at the time. Most members were back in their offices, or at least maybe not most, but a large number of members were back in their offices.
Okay. And did anything unusual happen that day?
Oh yeah.
I'm trying to give you open-ended questions. Can you describe what happened?
Sure. We're permitted to have phones on the House floor. I was not getting a signal, so I didn't know what was going on outside the House floor. But the first thing that I knew, a police officer, uniformed officer, actually no, I think the first thing. Why is it so quiet? A security detail escorted Speaker Pelosi off of the dais, and she was.
You think they're doing that on purpose, making it as quiet as they are?
No. His microphone setup reminds me of when Tubi Flair used to hang out, and it was definitely like a laptop native microphone that was 100% like a significant distance away.
Said that tear gas had been dispersed, and we were advised that there were tear
I'd say this is what
he's got a weird echo, reverb off the walls and stuff.
Yeah, it's because it's using a multi-directional mic, and it's not a good one.
She may have also said that the Capitol had been breached, but I'm not sure if she said that was clear indication.
Shitty audio.
A danger at that point. I can remember within seconds of that happening, a member from the Democrat side up in the balcony area, the gallery, yelled out, "This is your fault." And I'm sitting there without any context for what's going on. I don't have anything, a text from my staff or the ability to go online and figure out what was going on.
Okay. And then so were you actually debating while wearing gas masks?
No, I don't think anybody put their gas mask on. And at that time, it was more milling around and trying to figure out.
I'm not really sure, Puffer.
What the threat was. What would happen next.
I haven't heard from her.
And then did the Capitol Police or security respond in any way to a perceived threat?
Yes. So after that, after minutes of that, maybe longer, maybe 20 minutes, police officer came.
There's wide speculation now that that's actually a thing.
That we would be clearing the House floor. And that's when I saw officers of uniform and plainclothes take positions. I sit typically, and within that day, I was sitting near the center aisle.
I think that go ahead again. I've said it several times. I think both sides need to, calm the fuck down. Don't know, understand why it happens to be that one side just can't stop themselves, but think that the other side also needs to be cleansed.
Okay. And so what do the security police do? Or were they security or police? How should I describe
their beliefs
them?
are too far out there for me to think anything different.
Okay.
Just saying.
And so what did they do?
Really,
Too much extremism.
what's that?
Too much extremism.
I actually took my coat off. There was my jacket off. There was some members who were moving furniture over to block the door. And the officers, I know at one point had drawn their weapons. My memory also is after the members had moved some furniture over, there was a popping sound, and it was the glass over the door, and someone had popped that glass, and that's when the officers drew their weapons. It's hard in a room like that. It's hard to tell exactly what that noise came from. I could see the glass, so I knew, but it almost sounded like a bullet at first. And so the officers had drawn their guns and were securing that door.
Okay. Now, did you personally feel threatened? How did you feel perceive what was going on?
Well, I felt kind of stupid afterwards because at the time I took my jacket off and I was there to help police officers. 10 people in the building or 1,000 people. So when we started to, when the police started to clear the building, and at the same time, there were police officers behind the wall of the front wall of the House chambers. There were police officers who were clearly milling around and securing the other entrances to the House, and I could see that from my seat. When we started to clear,
It's really more material than it is a difference in beliefs. But I digress.
officers actually came over to me. I was down the aisle at this point, and they said,
But that's exactly what it is.
Nobody was, yelling or screaming, but it was
Ethnic cleansing.
a very serious situation.
Okay.
And we've seen
and
it. We've
what
seen
was
it
your
happen
view
in
of the
many
sort of
different places where
capabilities
Muslims
of
are
the
running around
Metro Police and
thinking
I'm sorry,
it's
the,
okay
security
to
officers?
cleanse the world of all Jews because they don't like their beliefs.
There were probably 6, 7 of them that were there at that one door, and it appeared to me with their weapons and an unknown threat to me at that point that they were in control of the House floor based on the number of officers, probably 30 to 40 officers around the House, well-armed officers.
Okay. And what was your perception as to, well, let me ask you this. Was anyone that you saw shot?
No, in fact, I didn't even hear the shot, but the shot would have occurred while I was there, because like I said, I was one of the last to leave the House floor, but I understood later that a lady had tried to breach the House chambers through the Speaker's lobby, coming in over the door, and she was shot.
Okay. So from your perspective, the way the security officers were operating, what did they, were you able to infer any sense of what their protocols or based on their behavior?
Yeah, I think based on my experience in law enforcement and what I saw them doing, their goal, their function was to make sure that there wasn't a hostage situation, to make sure that no members were going to be hurt or taken by whatever the mob was. Obviously, they have earpieces in, they're aware of what's going on. They were there to secure the floor until the members left, and as soon as the members left, I could see the officers leaving the House at that point.
Okay.
Leaving the House floor.
And why do you think they left the House floor?
Because I don't think, I think the threat that they were, and again, this is speculating, but the threat that they were there to minimize was the threat of injury to members and staff, and once that had been accomplished, they were withdrawn.
Okay. Are you aware of any sort of breaches or occupations of the Capitol prior to this event?
During the summer of 2020, there were riots, and the rioters had attempted to break through the barricades, and in some cases had broken through the barricades. Much smaller groups of people, but clearly they were protesting, and the goal was to breach the Capitol at that point. There was also an instance in 2016, I believe it was June of 2016, where there was a mass shooting, and I don't remember which one. It may have been a school shooting. The Democrats wanted, Republicans were in the majority, the Democrats wanted to have gun control bills heard. Speaker Ryan refused to bring
Gun control my nuts.
Democrats occupied
Kiss.
at that time. The Speaker ordered that the floor end, and the Democrats began to live stream from their phones. There was some fight, but there was certainly some intimidation, some pushing and shoving around whether the Democrats would control the Republican side of that of the chamber. We had a couple, or at least one on the ABC, a couple of veterans who ended that pretty quickly when they went over to the microphones, and so the Dems stayed on their side to engage in that protest.
Was the House able to continue its duties that day?
No, it was shut down.
Okay. Let me ask you if you're aware of how the police reacted when there were outsiders who came into the Capitol. I think you had testified in 2020.
Yeah, I don't think they ever breached the Capitol. Protesters were typically protesting in the evenings around the Capitol. The barricades, and they're fairly weak barricades that were set up. They look almost like something that you put your bicycle in a rec department or something. They weren't.
So basically, they were guardrails, like you'd have at a WWE event around the crowd.
To my knowledge, they never got into.
That was the barricades.
Okay.
That they
Let me
couldn't
turn your
breach in
attention to
2020.
after the events of January 6th. So are you aware of the January 6th Select Committee that was that ultimately conducted a form of an investigation into the events of January 6th?
Specifically, provided testified about his experience as a sitting member of Congress at the Capitol on January 6, 2021.
Your Honor, I think we have verbally as well told the court that we'd have two congressmen, obviously one who can't, who are going to testify about congressional procedures, including the January 6th committee. That's an event here, and you've specifically asked for evidence about the January 6th committee. That's why Mr. Hafey is going to be testifying, even though he was not placed on the petitioner's witness list. And so that's in response to that as well.
We have two options here. We can either take Mr.
The January 6th Select Committee.
Declaration, and I can put that into evidence, which would then
The on-select committee.
Yeah.
or we can allow Mr. Buck to testify.
We're going to talk about the J6 committee.
And you can cross-examine, which is your preference.
If I can have just a moment, Your Honor.
Sure. Just one, Congressman Buck.
Judge, I don't
Is
know
that-
if you were asking me to.
Yeah, if you could just continue to sit forward closer to the microphone
I'm assuming that you're willing
and
to
speak into the microphone.
He might do that.
That would be great.
Your Honor, I think we're fine if the Congressman wants to testify about that, as long as we're able to ask him about post-January 6th events as well.
Well, I'm not sure what was January 6th.
Well, they would probably revolve with reference to January 6th. As long as we have some leeway in asking you questions.
It's hard for me to rule on giving you leeway, but I have no idea what that will be, but let's proceed with
We're
this.
officially doing Joe's job better than him.
And just so you know, our position, Your Honor, we're going
Are we?
to ask Representative Buck about
No.
the January 6th committee and its
There's
process.
more fun.
We certainly agree that's fair game for
should we-
cross-examination. But any events after January 6th
No.
that ever reference January 6th,
Definitely
we'll
not.
probably object if it goes beyond the scope of our
I
direction.
know what you were going to say, and don't say that.
Fair enough.
Do we need to yell at everybody?
There's no need for that. That's why we're doing it better than everybody, because we don't have to yell.
Their beliefs are guiding their actions, but it's their actions that are catalyst. Not so sure.
To go ahead and
Representative
take
Buck,
this
our
conflict in the Middle East very seriously.
I'd like to ask just one question about.
Yes.
Sure,
I mean,
Your Honor.
as many should.
Congressman Buck, could you see.
I am
Stand with
of
what
the,
you believe.
I am of the camp of this is not my bullshit.
Police officers are all putting up barricades, etc. And could you see what was going on in the hallway, or are you kind of just in a vacuum at this point, in the sense that you see them seeming to prepare for something but don't know what's going on outside the room?
Yeah, that's why I mentioned earlier, I felt kind of stupid taking my jacket off and getting ready for a fight because I didn't realize until I got back. Actually, we were moved to a committee room after we were brought off the floor. I had young staff and I was concerned about them. And so I came back to my office rather than the secure committee room. And I saw on TV what was going on. And I thought, oh my goodness, there are a lot of people.
Thank you.
Congressman Buck, if I may ask you, how did you get from the Capitol back to your office?
There's a series of tunnels underneath the Capitol building.
Oh yeah.
The House offices, the Senate offices, the Library of Congress, all connected with a series of tunnels, and that's how police escorted us through those tunnels.
Okay, thank you. So, so let's turn to the January 6th committee. To your knowledge, how are members of committees through the normal process chosen?
So what happens is, I can give the January 6th as an example, but the speaker announces that there will be a January 6th committee. There will be X number of Democrats. I don't know if it was 8 or 9 Democrats on the committee. There will be, I think she said 5 Republicans on the committee. And at that point, she started naming the Democrats.
Welcome back, Ellie.
Within a week or 10 days, she started naming the Democrats for the committee, and the Republican leader at the time, we were in the minority at the time, the Republican leader, Kevin McCarthy.
Because we're currently watching the proceedings in Colorado on C-SPAN. It's kind of important.
Pelosi then denied Jim Jordan and Jim Banks and said they would not be seated on the committee. And at that point, the minority leader, Kevin McCarthy, withdrew all 5 names and refused to have anybody from the Republican Party sit on the committee. The next move, Speaker Pelosi announced that Liz Cheney would co-chair the committee. Obviously, Liz Cheney, a Republican, would co-chair the committee. And within a couple of weeks after that, Adam Kinzinger then was named to the committee by Speaker Pelosi. So there were this group of Democrats, 7, 8, 9, and 2 Republicans.
This is the Colorado hearing that.
Okay.
That Good
And
Logic was listening to.
and do you know Representatives Cheney or Kinzinger?
I know them both very well.
Okay. And your thoughts of them?
Yeah. Whether it's that.
Thoughts in terms of the January 6th.
Let me ask you this: what's your relationship with them? When you say you know them, if you have a relationship with them.
Well, I've had a long relationship with Liz Cheney. I worked for Dick Cheney on the Grand Contra investigation back in 1986-87. I knew Liz before she ran for Congress for Wyoming, and was in contact with her pretty consistently as she served here in Congress. Adam less so. I was on the Foreign Affairs Committee. He was on the Foreign Affairs Committee, so we saw each other during the committee work and had some conversation, but he was not a particularly close friend or colleague.
You're right, Squaw Bob. There are
So they
still
were appointed to
some
the January
people
6th committee.
that
To
believe
your
that.
knowledge, what were their
Yeah.
views towards the January 6th events when they were on the committee?
So after January 6th, Speaker Pelosi, understand the time frame. We got January 6th and then January 20th.
Yes, Squaw Bob.
Yes. That. I mean, AOC is still very scared too. Let's not get it wrong.
President Trump and
AOC is still.
on the floor.
She's been traumatized.
Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger voted for impeaching President Trump. I think of the 200 some odd Republicans, maybe 10, 12 voted for impeachment. So It was a fairly small minority, 5% of the overall conference.
I mean, Ellie, you're not that far off. I think you pretty much hit that one right on the head.
Let me go back to Liz Cheney. Do you, I mean, you talked about Conte. I mean, do you consider her a friend, or how would you describe that?
You know, Harry Truman said, if you want a friend in DC, get a dog. I think that Liz and I were.
I consider her a snake, a viper, a lizard.
I consider
person.
Liz my dog.
I mean, she's a rhino. She's not even a Republican. She's actually a Democrat.
Okay. So she and Adam Kinzinger were on the floor. Based on the vote for impeachment, as well as any other knowledge you have, did they represent the opinions of the large majority of the caucus?
On what subject?
With respect to the events of January 6th?
Well, I don't think they represented the views of most of the Republican conference, because most of the Republican conference, 95% of the Republican conference, did not vote for the impeachment of President Trump, and they did. So in the sense of where they were on January 6th, I think they stood out.
Were there other Republicans then who had different perspectives or viewpoints than Representatives Cheney or Kinzinger that did not serve on the committee?
Well, the five Republicans who Leader McCarthy assigned to the committee did not serve on the committee and did not share the views of Liz Cheney or Adam Kinzinger.
Okay. I'm going to represent to you that Representative Swalwell testified earlier, and that there was a text from him referring to Representatives Cheney and Kinzinger, in which he was saying that
Objection, you mispronounced the name Swallow as well.
was happy that they were on the Democrats' team with respect to January 6th committee.
This guy's so loud,
Is
and
that
this
an
guy
accurate
is so
description
quiet.
from your point of view?
Damn.
You know, I would have
Squaw Bob says not all women who are hot have a fine heart and soul as certain Cool Frog mods. He's calling all Cool Frog mods. Ladies, as a Gen Xer, I wish these dinosaurs would retire and let Gen X take over. Otherwise, we're going to be stuck with people like AOC. I know, right? And there's reasons for term limits. There's reason for term limits when it comes down to it. People didn't used to live until they're 80, 90 years old. I mean, I get some of them did, but
And did you
most
perceive
of
any
them didn't.
problems? Well, let me ask you this. Were there any other Republicans that served on the January 6th committee besides Representatives Cheney and Kinzinger?
No, I actually called Kevin McCarthy because of my background as a prosecutor, and I asked Kevin if I could get his permission to seek to serve on that committee, because I thought it was important that witnesses were cross-examined and documents were challenged. And Kevin told me that he did not want
Nowadays they do.
he didn't want anybody else, any other Republicans.
Why was it important for witnesses to be cross-examined and documents to be challenged?
Well, you know, in my experience as a prosecutor, if a defense attorney is present and a defendant isn't present, it's not a real fair trial. And in this case, you need to have both sides, you need to have the adversarial system working in order to get accurate.
I guess what I'm thinking about it is we don't have so many.
Did you think that Representatives Cheney and Kinzinger would sort of fulfill that role of
old people that are still active?
Fulfill
Old
that
people
role
back
of
in the day
ensuring
used
that
to
the adversarial
retire
process was carried
or
out?
stop working after a while and did less. It's like they're trying to do more and more. They need to pass that baton. They do. They really need to. Term limits need to happen.
Please don't do a Dianne Feinstein.
Regardless to, don't do a Dianne Feinstein. Yeah, right. Live
Dude,
it out.
she literally died in office.
Right.
I'm surprised she didn't literally die on the Senate floor.
Do you think you would have fulfilled that role had you been on the committee?
I would have done my best. I think that it would take more than one person because there were so many documents, so much evidence that was considered. But certainly,
I had to get some popcorn for this bullshit.
I've done my best. I worked, as I mentioned before, for Dick Cheney on the Iran Contra investigation. We had
When you apply for Social Security retirement as a federal employee,
you should be forcibly retired.
retired. I agree.
65 and out, or you should only be able to do like.
So,
So
when,
if it's 65,
well, let me ask you that. So
you
Speaker
think about
Pelosi,
it.
did she,
You
when
think
she
about it.
rejected,
Usually,
or
it's like
refused to
35
allow
or 45 to get these
certain
positions.
appointments by Representative McCarthy?
Right.
In
So
your experience in
to
Congress,
limit
was that
it to
a normal event?
it was not normal.
20, 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
And that's your term limit, 20 to 30 years, no more, no less. You can get,
In all,
even that might be a little much. That might still be a little much.
well, you gotta figure, most of these people don't start off in the U.S. government. They start off locally, and they get elected to something in their state. Then they end up in D.C. And as long as you're doing consistently different jobs, I guess, I don't know.
The typical process is for the minority party to be able to.
I'm not the right one to ask on what a good way to run the government is, because I say into the ground or into a wall. Be a place to
So
start.
you said it's never happened in the history of Congress. Did I hear you correct there?
Well,
To your knowledge.
to my knowledge, certainly in recent history, it has not.
Okay. So observing the January 6th committee procedures, were in fact, was in fact the evidence that was submitted to the committee subjected to the adversarial process? And why is that? If you could give me a little bit more of a description rather than a
Were there
two-letter word now.
any adversaries? There were no adversaries on the committee.
Well, I had the opportunity to observe some of the hearings. I had the opportunity to read parts of the report, and I had the opportunity to talk to some of the people who were alleged to have done things in the report and heard their side of the story, and they were never questioned. For example, Jim Jordan was up for speakership recently, and I went through with him some of the allegations in the January 6th report and then heard his side of the story. Those were not included in the January 6th report. And based on the makeup of the committee, there wasn't it wasn't inquiries that I certainly would have wanted to make. For example, what was Speaker
I hear insider stock trading.
Present, or at least
I get that. Lots of oversight on the finances and stuff. You're
There's
still going to
still
see
loopholes. Yep.
You're going to still see it. I don't think that you're going to walk away from not having that happen at some level. As you're going to
Because
be like,
every Joe Biden has a Hunter and or
do you
Jill
know
and
if
or
there were any members
what's
on the
his brother's
committee
name? John?
who
yes,
Jim. Yeah.
who
They'll
subpoenaed
just
or
get their
produced
family to do it
evidence
for
of
them and
witnesses that were
save 10% for the big guy.
supportive or sympathetic to the proposition that January 6th was not an insurrection and was not caused by President Trump?
Who's going to program the AI, Squab?
Leader McCarthy he made the statement that we would not be assigning Republicans to the January 6th committee after Speaker Pelosi had denied the assignments to Jim Jordan and Jim Banks. Speaker Leader McCarthy said that he was going to have a separate investigation, and that investigation would be our side.
Oh yeah, I think everybody wants everybody to be transparent at all levels, but that doesn't mean they're going to be.
Yeah, that's very, very idealistically thinking. I think I like
I'm
my
totally down.
idea. I like my idea the best so far.
I'm sorry, the
And
report would
that's
have been more,
don't allow for any career politics
is it fair to
and
say it would have
make
been more
this like
balanced?
jury duty. If there's a problem that comes up, draw names out of a hat.
Oh yeah,
And
no, yeah.
just send literal random people
Let me
to
ask you
go
about that separate
try to
committee real
figure it out.
quick. Did that committee
Get a
have
good
any
enough sized
subpoena
group of
power?
them together representing everybody, and
Did it have
like
any ability
this,
to compel the
except for
production of documents?
without having the same faces over and over again.
Or
Once you've done
witnesses?
your piece of legislation,
Okay.
you're out. You don't get paid shit. It's a job you have to do. You'll go to jail if you don't, like jury duty, and
No,
fuck
Your
off.
Honor, I'm talking about the
I
separate.
bet you that works
report
better
that
than this,
Representative Buck referred to, that Speaker
because nobody
McCarthy.
would be able to be bought.
Let me just clear up the record, Representative Buck. I'm sorry. Yes, Leader. I just want to help clear up the record a little bit. So your testimony was that Minority Leader McCarthy had sort of established a separate committee, correct?
Yeah, no frogs. Frogs are way too radical. They're squab.
Mm-hmm.
No Democrats on his effort. There were, I think, Jim Banks and a few others. Kelly Armstrong were on this other group that was formed to investigate.
Okay. Let me go back to the January 6th committee. You said there was no minority report produced by the January 6th committee. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And why is that important?
Well, because it provides the other side of the story.
Mm-hmm.
It provides
It's like having a dissent in the Supreme Court.
and it is important to have I believe, the full picture in a situation like the January 6th investigation.
Okay.
And all official.
You had said when you spoke with
Decisions
Representative
ought to
Jordan
be
that there
made
were
wearing
things
underwear?
that he said that were either much different or provided a much different context than what appeared in the January 6th report. Can you
Oh,
explain
the
that a little
government's
bit?
going to collapse. That's inevitable.
Sure.
They're putting money in inf. That shit ain't sustainable.
Your Honor, we're not introducing anything for the truth of the matter asserted. We're introducing information that shows the January 6th committee had one perspective, and that the perspective that Representative Jordan provided was much different. So we're using this to demonstrate the incompleteness and one-sidedness. Not that one side is true versus the other. I know we have other arguments about that, but I'm not looking to get the contents of either side. It's the difference between the two that matters.
Well, he said that if I recall, he said that Jim Jordan had a different perspective on something, and we've heard the details of what it is. So Mr. Congressman Buck, you can tell, if you wouldn't mind just telling the court what type of disputes.
Oh, I'm not
rather than just
wishing for it. I'm just seeing the writing on the wall.
One example would be
I agree.
I'm with you. Like, I don't necessarily. I'd like to see a peaceful overhaul of the system, but the system is like the Matrix. It will fight with everything it has to protect itself from deletion.
Committee staff had come back to his staff. So he says he was willing to testify. The report says that he was unwilling to sent a tweet, no, I'm sorry, he sent a text to Mark Meadows, I believe it was January 2nd, and in the text, the allegation in the report is that Jim Jordan advocated for the decertification, and Jim's statement to me was that he attached a law review article or a legal analysis, I guess it was a law review article, legal analysis to Mark Meadows, the chief of staff, to examine in terms of whether they could. So he says he wasn't advocating, but he was providing information to the White House on that subject.
So-
I'll review my objection. Hearsay and move to strike. Because he said, Jim Jordan says this, Jim Jordan says that.
I accept the testimony just for the limited purpose of that there were things that maybe Mr. Jordan would have liked to have told the House committee that he was able to.
Thank you, Your Honor. Representative Buck, let me ask you, why do you know so much detail, or why were you so interested in discrepancies between the committee report and why did you spend so much time learning about that from Representative Jordan?
Jim Jordan was a candidate for speaker. He was actually the speaker nominee for the Republican Party in the recent speaker issue that was going on in the last few weeks.
Okay. And so it's fair to say you spoke with him at length about these issues as part of that process?
He came to my office one evening in the middle of his time as speaker nominee, and we sat down for about an hour and 10 minutes.
Okay. To your knowledge, were any of the witnesses before the January 6th committee cross-examined?
I don't know that the concept of cross-examination is really part of what the committee process is. There are questions from Republicans, questions from Democrats typically in a committee process. It is not as clear as a courtroom that one side is cross-examined.
Okay. To your in your view, and based on your observations attending the committee meetings, were questions placed to witnesses that were an effort or seeking to elicit testimony that ran contrary to the thesis that President Trump caused an insurrection?
No objection, because Mr. Grace characterized as Congressman Buck attending the committee. I don't believe that Congressman Buck is on the committee.
Congressman, but when you talked about attending hearings, were you referring to the public hearings?
I didn't attend. I saw some public hearings on television, but I was not in attendance person.
So is that what you were questioning about?
His observations, yes.
You can answer.
Could you restate the question? I'm sorry.
I don't know if I can. I will try, though.
And maybe if you could do it a little less.
I'm sorry, a little less.
Leading.
A little less leading. Yes, Your Honor. Congressman Buck, from your observations of the committee process, do you think there were, can you describe whether the questions that were asked, whether they were postured and how they were postured to arrive at a full investigation?
Sure. I think that the questions were typically questions that would demonstrate President Trump's involvement and culpability in January 6th, or elicit answers that would demonstrate his involvement and culpability in the events of January 6th. As an old trial lawyer, I listened to a lot of those questions, and probably as most trial lawyers thought I was Clarence Darrow and I could have asked a better question, or I could have made an objection on hearsay or something at the time. So I tended not to watch a whole lot of what happened because it didn't seem to me that the process was set up in a way that would
Are you aware of any allegations that the committee altered evidence or altered exhibits that it received and then produced to the public?
I have heard of those allegations. I have not seen the documents and could not give you a judgment on whether I think those were accurate.
Okay.
Remember, this is the world of politics, and truth is not closely aligned with political views.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this then. When you say this is a world of politics, do you think that the committee report was meets the description you just described about the relationship of politics and truth?
Sure. The purpose of that report was there was a political purpose to that report, as there is with almost everything in Congress. And the political purpose was ultimately to win elections, to paint the one side in as bad a light as possible. And that's why typically there is a minority report in an investigation like this, so that both sides can say, but this is really what happened. Here are the documents, here are the phone calls, here's the testimony that supports it.
And it's your view that that did not happen in this case?
It's my view that the people who would have been most challenging to the evidence and testimony were not seated either by Speaker Pelosi or the McCarthy multiple.
Okay. With respect to the January 6th report, have you, what's your view on it from a political standpoint in Congress?
Well, I voted to certify the election. I thought what happened on January 6th was obviously bad. It was a riot, and it was meant to disturb a proceeding. And
Oh, this is so. I can't. I just can't do it anymore. I can't. I don't know how. I don't know who's watching that. If anybody's really seriously trying to pay attention to that and that are comfortable. I seriously just
advantage
let's go back to the
antagonists in
house.
both conflicts are connected to him. Just last week, Russia hosted representatives from Hamas and Iran. Iran is supporting both Hamas attacks on Israel and assisting Putin in his assault on Ukraine.
Looks like
Ukraine believes that 1,000 Iranian-designed drones were
They're
used by
still
Russia
debating
over the
on
past
the
6 months alone.
14.3.
We do not choose which crisis to respond to. Secretary General
Respond to neither of them.
said, quote, "We have the capability and the strength to address
I thought there
different
was something
challenges at the same
earlier
time. We don't have the luxury of choosing only one threat and one challenge.
that was saying that
If we
they
want to
actually
hold
passed
Hamas accountable,
something.
defeating Putin in Ukraine is also in our best interest. Anyone who tries to argue that a choice must be made between Ukraine and the American people or Ukraine and Israel is presenting a false dilemma. We must help Israel defend itself in the face of
Are you
terrorism
trying to say we can afford to
supporting
fund
Ukraine in their
18
war
wars?
against an autocratic invader.
Yes.
God
Gentle
damn
lady
it.
from Connecticut.
Every time I
reserves,
turn around, there's
Bowling Green,
another war.
Texas, recognized.
I yield to the gentleman from Louisiana, the majority leader, Mr. Scalise, for 1 minute.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Appropriations Chair, my good friend, Ms. Granger from Texas, for yielding and for bringing this important legislation, which I strongly support. We have seen the atrocities in Israel. We have always stood by Israel. And in fact, the United States is proud to be the first country that recognized Israel as a Jewish state on the heels of World War II, as the nations were coming together and recognizing the importance that we all get behind a Jewish state. But unfortunately, from that day, there were always people around the neighborhood who wished Israel harm. Over time, you've seen peace agreements, Abraham Accords, but you've always seen seeds of discord. And of course, the biggest discord started with Iran funding terrorist organizations like Hamas. and Hamas took action weeks ago, atrocities that are hard to repeat. We've seen, and the world needs to continue to see, because unfortunately, as the world is seeing the atrocities, while we recognize the lives that have been lost, not only Israelis, Jews, Americans, Palestinians, but you also see the ugly head of anti-Semitism popping up here on college campuses in the United States, other places around the nation and the world where anti-Semitism seems to rise its ugly head at times when Israel seems to be in a dangerous position. These are times when we all need to be standing with Israel, giving them the tools they need to make sure they can defend themselves against these atrocities. That's what this legislation does. And in fact, we worked with the leadership in Israel. We worked with the Biden administration, the Pentagon, others who know what's at stake. We've had longtime partnerships in our strength and our defense systems. If you think about the Iron Dome, David Sling, weapon systems that will be replenished with this legislation. A lot of this is American technology that's been partnered with Israel over many, many years to save lives in Israel. And as those weapon systems get depleted, we need to make sure they're replenished. The Iron Beam system, more advanced missile systems, some of the other partnerships that we've had for a long time, that's also funded in this bill. So making sure that Israel has the tools they need. We came out of the box ensuring under Speaker Mike Johnson that we send a strong message to the world that we support Israel, passing strong legislation to unite behind Israel. But now we need to back that up with action.
People like, jeez, they don't even know what they're watching today. They're barely talking.
This conflict. It's actually paid for.
Got two
paid for
people
not
watching us. That's
by
fun.
taking away existing IRS agents, but tens of thousands of new
Who's
proposed
doing what? Who's out
IRS
there doing
agents.
what?
That promise. Families making under $400,000
Good Logic still running.
are paying more in new taxes. And part
Everybody
of
go
that is
jump
the
over there,
army of
1.4K.
IRS agents that they're sending after people, tens of thousands under this bill.
What?
Whoa, that was strange.
Why did it do that?
Even the government doesn't want to watch the government.
They're like, nah. Why is it? Okay.
What happened?
Like, some of it's coming back slowly.
Are we all of a sudden on dial-up again? Is it loading?
I guess we'll just close that window and restart a new one.
I mean,
for whatever reason.
YouTube is asshole. And by YouTube, I mean C-SPAN. That was fun. Wasn't it, guys?
Administration selling their oil on world markets. We need to pass that legislation tomorrow, which we will, and hopefully a very big bipartisan vote. We need to start today by passing this legislation to give them the tools they need in Israel to make sure that they can push back and destroy Hamas, protect those citizens in Israel who deserve peace. And America's always stood by our ally, Israel. Let's continue that today. Urge passage, and would be happy to yield to, I still call him Leader Hoyer.
I thank my friend for yielding. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Scalise and I have been partners in being very, very strong supporters of Israel and making sure that Israel has the funds it needs to be successful, sovereign, secure, and safe. And we remain in that position. And the reason I asked the gentleman to yield, I don't know
You
what's
know,
going to happen.
all these guys all
to this
remember
legislation. I do know that the
that
chairman of the
this
Foreign
guy
Affairs
definitely
Committee has said
remembers
this
the last time
legislation
this
they're
happened.
considering is
When was the last time that we were
dead
at war with
upon arrival.
Israel's
in the
at war
Senate.
with
I don't know whether that's the case.
Hamas or whatever.
But
It's
I
like
would
every
ask my
50 years
friend,
something happens.
I'm no longer the
I know
leader,
this guy knows.
but I will tell my friend, the leader of the Republican Party, that if you would bring a bill to the floor tomorrow that has this $14.3 billion, I would like it to have Ukraine, but if it doesn't have Ukraine in it, I would like it to have humanitarian
I would vote it
relief.
down.
If it doesn't have humanitarian relief, I believe it would pass on suspension overwhelmingly with votes from your side and votes from this side. And I would ask the gentleman to consider that alternative. I thank the gentleman for yielding.
And I know the gentleman yielded back, and I appreciate
Ukraine's got
the
enough
conversations that the gentleman I had. He's led many delegations to Israel. For all, I think most of us have been to Israel and seen firsthand some of those towns. I've been to Sderot, other cities that have come under attack, and the heartbreak.
Have you been to
some of the kibbutzes,
Gaza?
and have heard just harrowing
my.
stories. And so we want to make sure they get their relief. I also know this, and obviously as we talk about funding of government, we just passed an appropriations bill last night. We're going to be moving, after we get through this bill, into 2 more appropriations bills. We'll be working, late
This
into
is
the night
different
tomorrow
if you go over
on
that
more
side.
appropriations bills to properly fund government. When you look at the bills we've already sent over to the Senate that include the defense appropriations bill, that includes more funding for Israel, along with the state and foreign operations bill that also includes more funding for Israel.
I'm with
When
Ellie
we've
Trump.
had heads of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, military leaders, come
About
before us in committees to
our own
testify about the
national
major threats
security.
globally, they've been asked point blank, what is the major threat to America? And you would think if you're, they've been asked point blank, what is the major threat to
Well,
America?
it's
And you would
glitching
think
again.
if you're, a military leader, you'd be talking about maybe China and some of
What
the
is that?
threats they pose that we know
What is this
are. What
dance
is the
movies doing?
major threat to America? And you would think if you're, they've
C-SPAN.
been asked point blank, what is the major threat to America? And you would think if you're, a military leader,
White
you'd be
supremacy.
talking about maybe China and some of the threats
It's
they pose
actually
that we
white
know are very
supremacy.
real. Other countries. That's not what they talked about. They talked about our nation's debt, that the
Oh.
nation's debt is the biggest threat. And so
Yeah.
if we can do both, support our friends around the world and start
Yeah, we can't. We can't pay the debt, y'all.
we need to secure America's border, because we know there are people on the terrorist watch list coming into our country right now that we
That's fun.
cannot ignore. This administration might be ignoring it. Democrat mayors, Republican mayors alike recognize it's a major problem in their cities that has to be confronted.
Oh my God!
We're going to
Stop with
confront
the
it,
monetary
continue to
help with
work
the foreign
on
countries.
those
I
issues
know,
as
right?
well. But all of this has to be dealt with at the same
I
time.
mean,
And none of this happens in a vacuum. And many of these problems are interrelated. And so we're going to continue to confront all of them and work as we can, hopefully.
Securing our own
together.
border would be great, but they don't even want to
obviously,
do that.
Today, maybe
They don't even want
we
to
might not
attend.
all be on the same page tomorrow. I think on that Iran
yeah.
oil sanctions bill,
Even if we
we'll be
did
closer,
just pull
but
out
we
of
got to keep
everywhere.
working through these issues.
Secure our
Thank the
border.
gentleman for his comments. Would
Fund
you yield for just a
foreign
short
war.
comment?
I'll yield one more
Thank
time.
you
We
very
can
much.
definitely
Very generous.
afford
Um,
20 wars.
The irony, as I pointed out,
We don't need to
Mr.
secure our
Leader,
border. It's
No
perfectly
border.
is
safe
that
here.
in the pay for that you have used, CBO scores that as a $12.5 billion increase in the debt, not a decrease. And the reason for that is it raises it cuts $28 billion essentially that we would otherwise collect, and that we spend 14 of that. So there's a net $12 billion plus remaining to add to the deficit. So I understand the gentleman. I agree with the gentleman. The debt is important. We need to deal with it. I agree with his observation that our defense officials see that as a clear and present danger to our country. We need to deal with it. But I suggest respectfully to the gentleman, his offset does not, or not his offset, but the offset does not accomplish that objective. And I thank you for yielding.
And thank you. And final point on that, obviously, if you look at the history of CBO, they're the referee, the scorekeeper that has to be used. They've often been wrong. I would say often wrong, but never in doubt. But when they're wrong, they're usually wrong to the detriment of taxpayers. And here's a classic example. Only in Washington, where eliminating government positions, they count as something that's going to cost the deficit. Getting rid of the size of government is ruled by CBO as increasing the deficit. But they exposed a dirty little secret about those new IRS agents. And I emphasize new. These are not existing employees. This is tens of thousands of new IRS agents that President Biden wants to hire. It exposed that the only way that they generate money is by raising taxes on families, including those making under $400,000. And in their report, they point this out. If you're an American citizen who believed Joe Biden's promise that you will not pay a dime in new taxes if you make less than 400,000, and he said it over and over again, it's on
You
video.
haven't been here that long,
That
have you?
promise is broken, according to the CBO in this report, to the tune of over $4 billion in new pet taxes that those families will be paying. Not existing taxes, new taxes those families will be paying. So if you want to save $4 billion in taxes, and you're one of those families that bought the promise, and frankly, in times of high inflation,
Scalise
high
just made it
interest
sound
rates,
like we
high
should
costs for
totally,
everything from
totally
gas to groceries,
make
no
sure that
family
we
should
have
be paying
another
more in
4
new
years of
taxes. I would argue
We
this
need more
bill will save
taxes,
those
yes.
families a lot more money than what those new IRS agents were going to collect in new taxes. And we're doing them all a favor while also helping address a serious spending problem in Washington and standing with our ally Israel, most so helping address a serious spending problem in Washington and standing with our ally Israel, most importantly. That's why we need to pass the bill. And I yield back the balance of my
Gentleman
time.
yields. Gentlelady from Texas reserves. Gentlelady from Connecticut.
Yes. Mr. Speaker, I yield 1 minute to the gentlewoman from Florida, a member of the Appropriations Committee, Ms. Frankel.
Gentlelady is recognized. 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I'm standing here at the member of Congress because my grandfather, Abe, was able to flee Europe as the Nazis took over. Then on October 7th, it happened again. Hamas' barbaric attack on Israel was the deadliest day for Jews since the Holocaust. And make no mistake, Hamas are terrorists out to kill all Jews and destroy Israel, and other enemies in the region are on the same mission. Reaffirming Israel's right to exist, Golda Meir said, Jews have nowhere else to go. Mr. Speaker, the United States has a moral duty and national security urgency to aid Israel in defending herself, and we must send an unmistakable message to the world that we stand with Israel. And I hope that as this process moves forward, we will all come together to do just that. And I yield back.
He yields. Gentlelady from Connecticut reserves. Gentlelady from Texas recognized.
I yield to the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Van Drew, for 2 minutes.
Gentleman's recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank the gentlelady, my friend from Texas, for yielding. Peace through strength. This is the principle that is called upon us today. If we are truly the beacon of democracy for all the world, we must help our greatest ally, Israel.
prosperous and
We
had
must help
money?
them from the threats to its very existence.
That's what you
It
thought.
is a message to the world that we stand
We have
with
to pay
our
for it.
allies, that we will help shield Israel from the rockets of Hamas, that we will help shield Israel from the death, the torture, the rape of babies and children and mothers and fathers and grandmothers and grandfathers. We have seen the face of evil.
We really shouldn't be watching this on YouTube.
That will take a resolute
Not
stand
YouTube.
against
Not-
terrorism
US
wherever it
government's not
is
very
and whenever it
YouTube
is.
friendly.
It is an unwavering commitment
Congress
to
is on
Israel's
C-SPAN, you're right.
absolute right to defend itself. Its absolute right to do what is ever necessary. I implore all of my colleagues, let us stand with Israel. This is a simple yes or no vote. Vote yes to stand with Israel. It is right. It is necessary. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Gentlelady from Texas reserves. Gentlelady from Connecticut's recognized.
The gentleman cares about what's happening to women, children, babies. There would be humanitarian assistance in this package. And with that, I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from New York, the ranking member of the Judiciary Committee, Mr. Nadler.
Gentleman's recognized for 2 minutes.
Oh,
I thank the
good
gentlelady,
God.
Mr. Speaker. I rise in strong opposition to this bill, which for the first time conditions emergency
you do.
essential aid to Israel
Shut
on
up,
cuts to the
Nadler.
domestic budget. The majority is attempting to divide Congress for purely partisan gain. It is despicable. I stand here as a proud progressive Zionist. Support for Israel is built into my DNA. My wife lived in Israel. I have family in Israel. I was horrified by the events of October 7th. It was a traumatic moment for Israel and a traumatic moment for the global Jewish community. I remain committed to doing whatever I can to support our ally Israel in its fight against the terrorist organization Hamas, especially since Hamas' statement last night that they would repeat the October 7th massacre over and over until Israel is no more. I look forward to voting for President Biden's complete supplemental military and humanitarian aid package, including strategic and military assistance to Israel, Ukraine, and Taiwan, and humanitarian assistance to Gaza, Israel, and Ukraine to deal with extreme crisis conditions caused by two major wars. But today's vote is not about supporting Israel. It's not about global security. Rather, today's vote is on a divisive political maneuver that leads us down a dark road. It sets a dangerous precedent, pitting our national security and support for democratic allies against domestic expenditures. And when Israel needs more funds, will we have to find another offset? And it must be repeated, this so-called offset will
Buddy,
actually
don't
increase
grow
the
our
deficit,
trees.
all while allowing the wealthiest to cheat on their taxes. As the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office has made
A
clear,
little bit of
it would
hypocrisy
add
there, hey?
$12.5 billion. No,
A little
reject
bit.
this unprecedented
Like it didn't happen with
partisanship
Ukraine,
and
eh?
wait for a genuine bill to aid Israel. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. Gentlelady from Connecticut reserves. Gentlelady from Texas.
I don't know why the video
Yield to
is
the
going
gentleman
to
from New
me.
He's
York,
kind of got
Mr.
the
Lawler, for
flickery
3
issue, y'all.
minutes.
This is not us.
Gentleman's recognized.
I really don't know why it's doing that. It's so funny.
It's broken.
From New York, Mr. Lawler, for 3 minutes.
Gentleman's recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We must stand with Israel in its time of need. This funding will go a long way towards ensuring that Israel has the ability to defend itself from the horrific campaign of terror waged by Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, and other terrorist organizations. What occurred on October 7th is akin to
Nadler
what
sounded
happened
more
to our
like
country on
he had
December 7th,
reasons on why he would
1941,
want to
or September
support,
11th, 2001.
but still doesn't
Israel
want this
has a right to
particular.
defend itself and fight
Doesn't
back
think
against
this one would
those
be a
who
good
see
one.
them eradicated from the
Really
face of
kind
the
of
earth.
confused on why he would
No one
think
told the United States after Pearl Harbor or 9/11
such a thing.
not
I mean,
to
does
hold the
Ukraine have to be
perpetrators of
involved
those
for him to be
attacks
like, yes,
accountable.
now we can protect
And the
my
perpetrators of this attack
family
on
and friends
Israel
that I know that
are
live
an
in Israel?
insidious
Right.
Really kind of confused on
organization
Nadler's
that has
saying no.
attacked their country. Hamas's status goal is the elimination of the state of Israel, and by extension, the genocide of the Jewish population living in it. We cannot let that happen. We have members in this body who have voted against condemning Hamas, voted against holding Iran accountable, members in this body calling for a ceasefire, despite the fact that Hamas has already stated this is just the first step. They will not abide by a ceasefire. This legislation before us today would provide $14.3 billion in aid to Israel. This is a significant
Sounds like a
defense
lot.
supplemental that includes $801.4 million in extra funding for ammunition procurement, $3.5 billion in funding for foreign military financing, $50 million in evacuation assistance support for the U.S. Embassy in Israel, $4 billion for Iron Dome and David Sling defense systems and other defense-wide procurement, and $38.6 million for Air Force procurement. This bill is necessary for our
Shelley.
closest ally in the Middle East, which is why I urge my
Jimmy.
colleagues on the other side of the aisle to join us in passing this critical aid for Israel
What did you do?
and
Good to
show
see you.
our
We're just
support
watching something as
for this
boring
beacon of
as
hope and freedom
Congress.
in the Middle East.
It's boring.
We cannot let our
can be
differences divide
boring.
us on this
We
critical
do have
issue.
fun opinions
We
on
cannot
some
allow the
of it,
bright
so
candle of democracy
and
in
some
the
of
Middle
it we
East
can even say.
to be extinguished by Hamas, Hezbollah, and
You
Iran.
know,
We
Cute.
cannot allow Israel to lose. This legislation
Israel's
is
really
not
gonna be a thing or
conditioning
not?
aid. It's
I mean,
paying
it kind
for
of
it.
sounds like it should
Apparently, my Democratic
be. You
colleagues
got
still
some weird
don't
ones that are
understand that we
against this
cannot just
bill.
continue to
like
borrow
Nadler
and
just
print new
was.
money at every opportunity. We have a debt that is approaching $34 trillion.
That's a lot.
It costs money, and we have to pay for it. So to oppose this simply because you don't like the fact that there is an offset
that.
is absurd.
Lots of money.
I look forward to everyone joining in passing this bipartisan legislation. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Gentlelady from Texas reserves.
You know who really
Gentlelady
doesn't
from
support
Connecticut's
this? The U.S.
On
people.
September 29th, the gentleman who just spoke voted for a $1 billion cut to Israel. I
I'm
yield
with
2
you,
minutes to
Ellie.
the
I
gentleman from
really
New York,
am.
the ranking member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Mr. Meeks.
Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to oppose this measure.
See,
First,
Ellie's
let the
my
record be
voice.
clear. There is no question that we all support Israel. Fact of the matter is, Chairman McCall and I worked very hard together to make sure that there was one voice on the very first vote, once the speaker was selected, to say that we all support Israel, bringing us together. You know, there are some decisive votes that we take as members of Congress that will stick with us. And one of those votes is this one, H.R. 6126. Congress has a proud bipartisan tradition of acting rapidly to pass emergency funding for critical national security needs. This legislation breaks that long and important tradition. Once we set the precedent of conditioning assistance to partners and allies in essential fights with poison pills, it is hard to go back. We can't unring that bell. We have stood in a bipartisan way to prevent conditioning of aid to Israel. And yet, here we are considering a bill today that does exactly that. Disappointingly, this bill doesn't include the $9.15 billion the administration had requested to address global humanitarian needs, including Gaza, undermining our values and the Biden administration's careful diplomacy and bipartisan support for Israel. We are a nation that aims to use its power for good in this world. That has been our guiding principle, drawn from the lessons learned when we look away. Mr. Speaker, we can't afford to look the other way as Ukraine faces a vital moment and critical munitions shortfalls. We can't afford to look the other way as countries in the Indo-Pacific are looking to the United States for leadership as we engage in strategic competition with China.
We can't afford to pay for all their shit.
To the world that we're looking away,
As we
Mr. Speaker,
engage
let's
in
reject this
strategic
bill, which
competition
trades our
with China.
long-term national security for a fleeting
Gentleman's
political
time has
advantage.
expired.
And let's get back to work.
Gentleman
back.
yields. Gentlelady from Connecticut reserves. Gentlelady from Texas recognized.
I yield to the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Smith, for 2 minutes.
Gentleman's recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank my good friend for yielding and thank her for her leadership on protecting Israel and providing them the means to protect themselves. Mr. Speaker, our great friend and ally Israel, with assistance from the U.S., continues to respond to the cowardly Hamas invasion that includes psychotic terrorists butchering innocent civilians, rape, hostage-taking, the beheading of babies, and the daily indiscriminate missile attacks that are reminiscent of Nazi buzz bombs and V-2 rockets. Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said that he would never allow a second Holocaust, nor should we. Anti-Semitism, as we all know, is at the root of Hamas violence against Israel, and I ask members to read the charter that was put out by Hamas in 1988. They call for killing Jews, slaughtering Jews. I ask every member to read it, and also for the end of Israel, and that there be no Israel, that they eviscerate it from the planet Earth. This important bill provides $14.3 billion to provide military assistance to Israel, including $4 billion to replenish Iron Dome and David's Sling, $3.5 for more foreign military financing, $1.2 billion for the continuing development of the Iron Beam system, and so much more. Like the Nazis before them, Mr. Speaker, Hamas and its chief terrorism sponsor, Iran, are committing genocide against the Jews. And can you believe it? Iran is now the chairman or chairing the Human Rights Council in Geneva. As of today, that is absurd. The United States and all people committed to human rights and the rule of law must stand with Israel. That means our moral support and our prayers. That means
Yeah.
ensuring
Our
that
moral
critical
support and our
intelligence be
prayers.
shared
Yes.
and every weapon system critical in destroying Hamas, including Iron Dome, is conveyed to Israel in quantities commensurate to the challenge and without any delay. This is an important bill. I call on my friends on the other side of the aisle to support it. Yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentlelady from Texas reserves. Gentlelady from Connecticut is recognized.
The gentleman from New Jersey on September 29th voted for $1 billion cut in aid to Israel. I yield now 1 minute to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Doggett.
Gentleman's recognized.
This bill is soft on war crimes. The massacres in Mariupol, in Bucha, and the kidnapping of Ukrainian children, similar to what happened in Israel, are all crimes against humanity. Like the Holocaust, there is no other side justifying these crimes, and all of these criminals must be held accountable. And yet, because of Trump affection for Putin and his little helpers here in Congress, this bill offers absolutely nothing to help fight Russian terrorists and nothing to stop Hamas terrorists unless well-connected Republican tax cheats get help first. Nor does defeating Hamas require encouraging collective punishment of the children of Gaza by denying them food, medicine, and water. Immediate Senate correction of the many failings in this bill can produce a balanced bill that I and many others will join in supporting. And a humanitarian pause now, stopping disproportionate responses, represents no surrender to Hamas. Rather, it offers a chance to secure the hostages, avoid a wider war, and achieve long-term security. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Gentlelady from Connecticut reserves. Gentlelady from Texas recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady from Texas reserved. Gentlelady from Connecticut is recognized.
Do it again.
I yield 1 minute to
No,
the
again.
gentleman from California, Mr. Sherman.
Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
epileptic.
Speaker Johnson.
Smack the TV, maybe let them fix it.
Yeah, no. Not smacking a 27-inch monitor.
Every time a billionaire cheats on his taxes, a member of the Freedom Caucus. Speaker said today that Israel can't wait for this critical aid. Then he brings to the floor a bill that he knows is dead on arrival in the Senate, and he knew full well that all he had to do was bring it up without the IRS provisions, and it would pass overwhelmingly in this House, the Senate, be on the president's desk in a day. For 50 years, every Israel bill that came to this floor passed with overwhelming bipartisan support. And that is critical because Israel has one friend in the world. And if Israel becomes a partisan issue, then Israel has one half of one friend in the world. Hamas was willing to kill, to decapitate, and to die to undercut world support for Israel, particularly bipartisan support here in the United States. No one has done more than our new speaker to help Hamas achieve that objective.
Gentlelady from Connecticut reserves. Gentlelady from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady from Texas reserves her time. The gentlelady from Connecticut.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 4 minutes to the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Schneider.
Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
4 minutes.
4 minutes. Gentlelady from Connecticut has 5 minutes remaining.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition to this bill. 80 years ago, the greatest generation laid their lives on the line fighting for our country and the free world in Europe, Africa, the Middle East, and Pacific. Today, we are facing grave global challenges and threats not seen in decades. The world is again looking to the United States to lead, and we must not shrink from the burdens of our responsibility.
I was about to say, you must
We are
not.
here
Yeah,
today
you're
talking
right.
about Israel and our ironclad commitment
should
to its security.
Get
Israel
out
is
of other
fighting a
people's
war
business.
for its survival and must defeat Hamas. Hamas is a genocidal, nihilistic terrorist organization
dedicated to the destruction of the state of Israel and the murder of the Jewish people. There will not be peace for Palestinians or Israelis until Hamas
Bye,
can
Ali.
no longer rule over Gaza or threaten Israel from its borders. It is also
I
important to
don't know what
understand that
happened to the
Putin's
flag.
war against Ukraine cannot be separated from Hamas's war against Israel. Success in both wars is imperative for the interests of the United States. We must demonstrate to our allies and our enemies that we are not just able, we are committed to support Israel, Ukraine, and our friends in the Indo-Pacific as they defend themselves. Sadly, at this moment, the new
I
Speaker of
hope
the
they
House and the
don't.
bill he brought to the floor
They look for us
today
to pay for it,
are
though.
coming up woefully short. Leaders from both sides of the aisle have long accepted three tenets in their support for Israel. Number one, support for Israel must never be a bargaining chip. Second, support for Israel is and must remain broadly bipartisan. And third, aid for Israel must never be conditioned. This bill violates all three. Right now, Israel urgently needs our strong support. Meanwhile, Republicans who have too long tried to use Israel as a political partisan wedge are now conditioning aid to Israel on the partisan demand we defund the IRS. Reflecting the cynicism of this move, their condition for supporting Israel will not even pay for itself, but will dig a fiscal hole $27 billion deeper. It'll be far better and less costly in blood and treasure if we ensure Russia, Iran, and Hamas are defeated in their current wars than if our enemies achieve strategic victories against Ukraine and Israel, and America has to strengthen our defenses in Europe and the Middle East. Speaker Johnson's plan is dangerous, reckless, and irresponsible. It's dangerous because it endangers Israel's security. It's reckless because it conditions aid to Israel for the first time. It is irresponsible because it adds $27 billion to the national debt. I'm fully committed to ensuring Israel gets the aid it needs as quickly as possible. I will work with anyone, Democrat and Republicans, to get this done. And we all know the Senate will send us a robust bipartisan package. I look forward to leading the charge, making sure that package passes overwhelmingly in this House. But I cannot support the terribly flawed, weak, and dangerous bill Speaker Johnson and the Republicans have on the floor today. I urge all my colleagues to reject the cynical bill before us. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Gentlelady reserves from Connecticut reserves. Gentlelady from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady from Texas reserves. The gentlelady from Connecticut.
Can I ask how much time is
Gentlelady
remaining?
has 2.5 minutes remaining.
What I'd like to do is yield the balance of my time to the gentleman from New York, Mr. Goldman.
Gentleman's recognized for 2.5 minutes.
I thank the gentlelady for recognizing me. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I stand before you and this body as the only member
This seems
who
to
was
be
in
the
Israel
general
on October 7th, hiding in a stairwell with my
consensus
wife and 3 young
of
kids to
people
avoid
of the
rockets
frog
sent our
Trump.
way by a brutal terrorist regime. 27
We
days
keep
later,
the money and
there are
protect
240
ourselves from
hostages that
invasion at
remain
the
in
borders.
Gaza. My children are still traumatized, but their trauma does not compare to the trauma every single Israeli feels after the most barbaric and horrific terrorist attack targeting Jews since the Holocaust. So to my Republican colleagues, please spare me the lectures about what is best for Israel. You will not find a member of
What about what's
Congress
best
who
for
is more
America?
supportive of Israel than I am. And that is why I am so personally disappointed that the House Republicans have chosen to divide us by playing political games with aid for Israel, when what Israel needs desperately right now is our unified, unconditional support.
Wallet.
412 members of this
We
body
need a
voted
unified,
last week to
unconditional
condemn
wallet.
Hamas and support Israel. But today, for the first time ever, Republicans have put conditions on emergency aid to Israel in a purely political ploy designed to divide us. This is a terrible precedent for the future of Israel. I look forward to supporting the full amount of Israel aid that is in this bill when it comes back from the Senate as soon as possible and without conditions. Support for Israel may be a political game for my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, but this is personal for us Jews. And it is existential for the one Jewish nation in the world that is a safe haven against the rising tide of anti-Semitism across the globe. This is a shameful effort to use Israel and the Jewish people as a political weapon. I urge my colleagues to vote no.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentilai's time has expired. Gentilay from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I urge the support of this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentilay yields back. Pursuant to House Resolution 838, the previous question is ordered on the bill. The question is on engrossment and third reading of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Third reading.
A bill making emergency supplemental appropriations to respond to the attacks in Israel for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2024, and for other purposes.
Pursuant to Clause 1C of Rule 19, further consideration of H.R. 6126 is postponed. Pursuant to House Resolution 838 and Rule 18, the Chair declares the House in the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for further consideration of H.R. 4821. Will the gentleman from Nebraska, Mr. Flood, kindly take the chair?
The House is in the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for further consideration of H.R. 4821, which the clerk will report by title.
A bill making appropriations for the Department of the Interior, Environment, and related agencies for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2024, and for other purposes.
When the Committee of the Whole rose earlier today, a request for a recorded vote on Amendment number 78, printed in Part A of House Report 118-261, offered by the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Burgess, had been postponed. Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, proceedings will now resume on those amendments printed in Part A of House Report 118-261, on which further proceedings were postponed in the following order. Amendment number 2 by Ms. Hegman of Wyoming. Amendment 15 by Mr. Collins of Georgia. Amendment number 59 by Mr. Perry of Pennsylvania. Amendment 60 by Mr. Perry of Pennsylvania. Amendment 61 by Mr. Perry of Pennsylvania. Amendment number 66 by Ms. Harshberger of Tennessee. Amendment 70 by Mr. Perry of Pennsylvania. Amendment number 73 by Ms. Boebert of Colorado. Amendment number 74 by Ms. Boebert of Colorado. And Amendment number 78 by Mr. Burgess of Texas. The chair will reduce to 2 minutes the minimum time for any electronic vote after the first vote in this series. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on Amendment number 2, printed in Part A of House Report 118-261 by the gentlewoman from Wyoming, Ms. Hegman, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 2, printed in Part A of House Report number 118-261, offered by Ms. Hageman of Wyoming.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will now rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 15-minute vote.
So, a long day of work continues here in the House as members have been considering both 2024 government funding as well as emergency aid to Israel, and another series of votes now, beginning with amendments to the Interior and Environment spending bill for fiscal year 2024. After this, votes on passage of the Israel aid bill, which the White House opposes, and then a vote on a postponed suspension bill condemning the support of Hamas, Hezbollah, and other terrorist organizations at institutions of higher learning, which may lead to the creation of a hostile environment for Jewish students, faculty, and staff. That's coming up a little bit later. Again, this is the First Amendment vote here on an amendment that reduces Bureau of Land Management funding by 50%. This is a 15-minute vote. While members vote here on today's Washington Journal, several members of Congress joined us to discuss the aid to Israel legislation and federal spending.
Joining us first is Michael Schnell, congressional reporter with The Hill, to talk about what's happening over on the House side.
Yep.
Michael Schnell, is there going to be a vote today on aid to Israel?
Is
That
there?
is still an open question right now, but the House is
It's a
expected
big
to
question.
begin debate on that bill to send aid to Israel. It's a $14.3 billion bill. All that
name is
aid will
Michael.
go to Israel. It's a standalone bill for Tel Aviv. And then one of the controversial parts of this piece of legislation is it includes an equal amount, $14.3 billion.
One person watching. I'm with you on that, Shenny.
Funding that was
I mean,
provided
you know.
under
Yeah.
the Democrats' Inflation Reduction
now that
Act,
they're
their
done
marquee spending bill that was signed into law last year, that
doing
provision has sparked some howls from Democrats arguing
this
that
and just
this
kind
is
of
emergency
putting up a
funding, it's
nomination
gonna
for
be
it.
offset by
Now they have
spending
to
cuts,
vote.
and also
And you
upset
see
that
the
it goes against one
nays.
of President Biden's
You'll see
signature legislative
yays from it.
accomplishments. So
Yeah.
that would be an interesting debate play out on the House
Just
floor later today. When exactly will that
Vote
vote take
on one
place? It's not
of
exactly clear yet,
131
but the
amendments.
expectation is it would be either today or tomorrow.
Why include cuts to the IRS? Why do they want to do that and to pay for some of this aid to Israel?
Because
Yeah, so look,
IRS.
traditionally,
the
Democrats,
whole
of
thing
course,
is
are
ridiculous.
Republicans, I'm sorry, are typically deficit hawks, and they want to make sure that we're not adding to federal spending. They are very frequently pointing out that the federal deficit is ballooning, and they say that that's a problem. So the notion here was that including those cuts in the legislation would offset that spending, so it wouldn't actually add to the deficit. But that's just actually not the case here. Just yesterday, the Congressional Budget Office, a nonpartisan scoring agency, came out and said that the House GOP's Israel aid bill actually adds to the deficit. The number is around $12 billion. And essentially that's because this money that is being cut from the IRS is meant for enforcement. So because that money for enforcement is being cut and taken away in the process of sending this aid to Israel, the CBO was saying that this entire piece of legislation would actually end up adding to the deficit in the long run.
We understand that Speaker Johnson met behind closed doors with his Senate colleagues, Senate Republicans. What did he tell them?
Yeah, he told his Senate colleagues that, look, is that he's going to go ahead and pass this piece of Israel legislation without Ukraine aid, because of course Ukraine aid has become a
Fuck
very
Ukraine.
polarizing topic within
Which
the
is
House
fine.
Republican
They don't need to
Conference.
put
There's really a
Ukraine aid
growing
in there.
contingent
Nobody needs
of
Ukraine aid.
Republicans who have become skeptical of sending
Especially
more
not
aid to
Ukraine.
Ukraine. There was sort of a litmus test vote last month
Stop
where
just
the House
randomly
voted on a
pumping
sum of
money into
money, sending
Ukraine.
that to Ukraine, just a standalone Ukraine bill. The bill passed in the long
Vote
run
on
with
one of
help from Democrats,
131
but more
amendments.
Republicans voted against that piece of
Yeah.
legislation rather than for it, which was
That's a
really
long time.
interesting data point
It's a
when you
long
talk
time.
about the grand scheme of things.
We're not
when
going
you-
to sit
of
here and watch
discussing
that.
potential aid
We
to
could be here
Ukraine,
for a
and the issue
minute,
of Ukraine is
guys.
a political one.
No,
So yeah,
But
we're at
bring some,
3 hours.
Speaker Johnson
bring some
told
people
Republicans
That's
around.
that he's
more
going
than
to have to
enough.
move Israel aid alone,
Oh,
and that if he wants to try to get Ukraine aid off the finish line,
see,
it's going to have to be linked with border security.
Yeah.
C-SPAN, for whatever reason, likes to be ridiculous.
It's just broken today.
Right now, the Senate is moving forward with something similar to President Biden's, well, rather not something similar to, is moving forward with President Biden's $100 billion supplemental request, which includes funding for Ukraine, for Israel, border security money, in addition to funding for
What a
allies in
booty
the
holes.
Indo-Pacific. The
I
thought
don't care what
there
they
and the belief
sell.
among the White House,
Stop
Democrats, and
stealing
even
my
several
future.
Republicans, Mitch McConnell, the minority.
So let's go. Let's see here. Where's see? The Senate floor is not. They're still doing the confirmation thing.
Are
No,
they?
they're not. They're done. They finished. There's 6 hours of stuff that they did. Senate is not in session.
Yay. The Senate. The
Either
Galactic
way,
Senate.
Let Israel and Ukraine sell land to get their money if they need it so bad. I don't think that's the problem.
They need your money, and the government needs to launder it so they can make sure that portion comes back to them.
Hopefully, what? Squabob.
Squabble. Yeah.
Hopefully, Joe didn't get. I don't know why.
Why he would.
Is there a reason for him to do so?
Yeah. Do you have any
Anyway.
context to that?
Wow. Well, I do have to say, if you hadn't watched the other day's show, yesterday's show or whatever, when on the
It did
censure,
show up Caesar.
it's very, very popular episode in itself, as we actually go through the censure of Rashida Tlaib have not been censored.
Yeah.
I got a lot of
yesterday.
views on it. I just got a couple comments on it within the last 50 minutes.
I haven't read the comments on that. Oh boy. I was here for that, so.
Yeah. And I figured as much. People see the change and they're like, oh, he's doing different things over here on the YouTube side. And it's like, well, sometimes you gotta change things that you do. Sometimes you do. You can't just
YouTube.
I don't know.
Comments.
YouTube. Let's see here. Where's the see if I can't find comments on it.
You're gonna bring the comments up.
Comments. Yep. Video comments from yesterday's. Can't really see it too well, but you can. User something 54 minutes ago.
User. Enemies right under our noses. Right in
Enemies
Congress.
right under our noses. Right in Congress. Unspeakable insanity. Kinda.
Yes. Yes.
What on earth is going on here? Oh,
Government.
Frost, Op-G, full stop.
Fosto PG, I think.
Either way. Either way.
I think it's government.
I'll give you the give you the heart on that, but when it comes to this is what on earth is going on here? I mean,
It was just
nothing.
government.
Absolutely nothing happened there. Nothing
some good-
happened. They
some good government.
failed to do what they were intended to do in censoring Rashida Tlaib.
Yeah.
Failed.
I didn't have much faith in them succeeding anyway. The government does a really good job of protecting itself.
Well, that's fun. We stop watching. We go from 2 people to 5 people.
I
Like, oh,
mean-
they're done watching. Okay, good.
They're like, oh yeah, the government's gone. We can all come back and hang out now. I mean, now they're just giving their opinions on the government, which faux show ain't gonna get them shut down. Realistically, though,
Dr. Squabob. And sometimes when we touch The honesty's too much, and I have to close my eyes and hide.
You're supposed to sing it. He did musical notes.
Yeah,
If
but
he
I
does
don't
musical
know
notes,
I don't know the tone
I don't
behind
know
it.
it either.
My singing brings all the girls to the yard. Really? Is that true, Squad Bob? Is that true? All right, y'all. We're gonna go away, I think.
Yeah,
We're gonna
3
go away.
hours of like 3 hours of the worst content ever, and now we're finally getting an audience, and we out of here. Suck it, audience.
You should have been here when we was.
I mean, there's a reason they weren't, and it's because of what we were watching. We need to find something cooler to do during the day. Then, I mean,
yeah,
if
well,
we're-
sometimes it's not the easiest thing to do.
I mean,
You just get so many different people that are going live doing different things.
yeah, everybody does the things. Maybe we just need to do more commentary so we can keep these guys interested and entertained. Because these congressers,
The congressers are
terrible to
too
listen
much for
to.
us.
They're terrible to listen to. Like, it's awful. I can't blame people for not wanting to watch that. If you want to know who rules you, just look for who you aren't allowed to criticize. You mean like Google and YouTube and that little demon troll, Dr. Anthony Demon Troll?
No, not gonna do that. I was gonna go ahead and I was gonna try redirecting somewhere, but
Oh,
I don't.
where were you
I
trying to
don't do
send these
this.
fine
I
folks?
not gonna do it. Not gonna do it.
Did we get any comments on this stream? No, we probably can't see those. Can you?
All right, we're just gonna go. If you want to know who rules you, just look at who you aren't allowed to criticize.
Yeah.
On
The
that,
elections.
thank you so much for being here. Love y'all so much. We'll be back. I'll be back tonight for an episode of Stick with Cool Frog.
Yeah, he's going to be a
regular
sticky frog tonight. Normal
8:30
time.
Mountain Standard Time. I don't know how long that's going to be. I really got to do some more research for that.
The
do
news just
appreciate y'all.
seems to be on a loop at this point in time, y'all.
Huh?
The news just kind of seems to be on a loop. There's nothing really happening. It's just kind of like they're saying the same thing on the same cycle until something else happens.
Right. But yeah. All right, we're gonna go. Later, everybody.
Later, everybody.